Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Tsunade was pregnant with Naruto child. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Naruto Umuzaki breathed in the cold night air as he stood on the second floor balcony of the Hokage mansion, looking up at the night sky. He turned around as he heard the door open. Naruto, come back to bed. Anko and Tsunade are getting chilly without you. Ha ha, okay. Hinata-chan, I'll be right there, you go on ahead. As Hinata Hyuga went back into the apartment, Naruto took one last look at the night sky and saw three brilliantly bright stars, reminding him of the three precious loves in his life, and the events that led to them finding each other. Another day, another dent. Naruto mumbled as he walked through one of the many small woods within the gates of Konohagakure. The foliage was light and controlled, unlike the dense woods just outside the city's gates. With the exception of a few cleared paths for traders, there was an almost impenetrable forest surrounding the city. Impenetrable for non-ninjas, anyway. That was the domain of the Anbu, but Naruto preferred finding solitude after a hard day's training amid the nature within the city, which many of the village residents often took for granted. He had returned from a training pilgrimage with Jiraiya a day ago, the perverted hermit Sannin having taught him all he knew. It was supposed to have taken 3 years, but with the aid of the demon inside him, and an endless love of learning new techniques, in a mere 12 months he had absorbed all the wisdom and power that the perverted ninja master had to offer. For some reason Jiraiya wanted to keep going, but without anything left to teach, Naruto had begun to long for his native soil. Gone was the effervescent confidence and bubbly bravado he held a year ago, replaced by guarded optimism and carefully planned action. He was not a sourpuss pessimist by any means. After all, Naruto was still Naruto, orange outfit and all. But still, a year of training in near solitude had taught him the value of silence and restraint. His return had been triumphant, at least in his eyes, but the day had been less than stellar. While Jiraiya visited the Hokage, both to deliver his report and make yet another doomed attempt at flirting, Naruto busied himself with visiting all his old friends, but one meeting had been less than pleasant. Sakura Haruno. Currently growing into a fine medic nin, Sakura studied under the Hokage herself. But despite her promising ability, there were several issues which made Sakura a less than promising protege. When Sasuke abandoned Konoha, he had abandoned her as well, and Sakura had dealt with his leaving in a regressive way. Ultimately, she was more comfortable hanging on to what she was familiar with, what was comfortable for her. Her adoration of Sasuke as a kind of golden Adonis never wavered, even when most of his fan club, including Ino, had moved on. Furthermore, her coldness towards Naruto seemed to magnify, always giving him grief for even daring the most modest of friendly gestures. It was probably at Tsunade's insistence that Sakura stomached the presence of the man who lost Sasuke-kun. I don't know what she's had to deal with, so I won't judge her, but damn, she didn't have to hit me quite so hard. Oh, well, add another to the long list of people who hate me. Naruto sighed. Between her and the villagers, many of whom were extremely upset that his leave had not been permanent, Naruto had his work cut out for him. And he knew it. To be fair, he mused, not everything was going to hell, as he thought back to the other events of the day. Something that was positive in his eyes was the meeting of someone who he hadn't considered a friend up until now. Around noontime, while eating at Ichiraku's ramen, Naruto was approached by Mitarashi Anko, the special Junin who had served as examiner during Naruto's Chunin exam. Apparently her favorite dango shop was about next door to Ichiraku. She was beautiful, that was for sure, and she carried herself with a sensuality and aggressiveness that scared most people, but Naruto found intriguing. Their rapport was odd, to say the least, a unique mixture of bragging, flirtation and thinly veiled threats of violence somehow combining into a friendly conversation, all spoken between mouthfuls of dango and ramen. During this bizarre verbal dance, Shide begrudgingly admitted that his victory over Neji Hyuga in the finals had been pretty cool, and then made an innuendo about how he could put his amazing stamina to better use. That had sparked a kind of contest between the two, to see who could make the other more embarrassed by their conversation. After about 5 minutes Naruto was nearly choking on his miso ramen with every word that came out of Anko's mouth. She was simply too good at teasing. By using her wiles to fluster him, she was winning their little verbal contest, but Naruto quickly thought of a way to duck out without technically losing, and get the last laugh. I'll have to take you up on those offers sometime, Anko-chan, I have to get going. Anko grinned wide in victory at this. Oh, and thanks for covering the bill. Naruto quickly muttered under his breath. Half a second later, Naruto was halfway down the city block, leaving behind a momentarily confused and soon-to-be broke Anko. Ah, the Dine and Dash, a classic, Naruto reflected. Yet another technique taught to him by Jiraiya. Arg, I'll get you for that, Uzumaki. Anko's voice echoed in the background as Naruto dashed towards a crowded open marketplace. Strangely, her tone had carried not only anger, but also a hint of playfulness, as if she knew she had lost the battle, but was swearing to win the war. Keeping up a decent clip in case the special Junin decided to chase after him. Naruto accidentally rammed right into someone. Ow, damn it. Gomen Nasai, are you alright? Don't apologize. I was the one who was running full bore. Na Naruto-kun? Rubbing his head and looking up, he saw who he had bumped into. Hinata-chan. Fancy meeting you here. Normally almost always wearing a small pout ever since Naruto had left, Hinata broke out into one of the widest grins Naruto had ever seen. That was of course for about 3 seconds, before Hinata fainted dead away, a small nosebleed apparent. Despite any progress she had made in the last year, she was still a little fragile, apparently. Once she had recovered they had walked all over the city, merely talking of days past and dreams of the future. She seemed deeply upset when evening came and they had to part ways for home. From what everyone would tell him later, Hinata had been downright depressed during his absence, but had blossomed with his return. It warmed him to think his friendship meant a lot to someone. Hinata was dark and shy, Naruto reflected, but once you got to know her she was very good friend. Now walking through downtown, Naruto absent-mindedly kicked a Ken lying in the street and muttered, so everything's not a total bust. He reaffirmed to himself. The rest of the Genin 9 were happy to see him, as well. A year hadn't been enough time to turn his world upside down. With the exception of Ino, who was taking her training more seriously now, everyone else seemed much the same. Naruto took one last look at the evening sky, admiring its reds and oranges before turning and heading for home. What he did not notice was several sneering figures hanging outside a nearby bar, and how they began to follow him once he was further down the road. Tsunade drummed her fingers against her desk as her old comrade made his report. Jiraiya had come back far too fast. His purpose for taking Naruto out of Konohakagore was twofold, both to strengthen Naruto and stall the Akatsuki. They could not take him if they could not find him, but they had not counted on Naruto mastering Jiraiya's lessons so quickly. It had made sense, Tsunade considered, that a young man able to learn the Rasengan within a week could fully grasp Jiraiya's other techniques in a year. It was a costly miscalculation. Naruto was back in Konoha, hardly a safe haven, as Kisame and Itachi's little incursion a year ago had made clear. But whisking him away again would not work, either. Tsunade truly believed that Naruto would become the Rokudame, but in order to do so he would have to sway the hearts and minds of the villagers, starting with his peers, and he could do no such thing hundreds of miles away. He was destined to be a leader, not a hermit. It can't be helped, Jiraiya. He's here to stay. The best we can do is try to protect him inside the village until he is strong enough to fight the Akatsuki. You mean assigning Anbu to be bodyguards? No, many of the Anbu hail from clans which lost much family 13 years ago to the Kyuubi. At best they would be lax in their guardianship, at worst they might plot to harm him, and I will not tolerate that. Then what's the plan? We will have to assign someone to be a personal mentor, probably a Junin. Someone to continue fostering his abilities while simultaneously protecting him. Any candidates? None so far, unfortunately. Well, don't worry about it. The Akatsuki won't be here overnight. We still have some time to formulate plans. What say you and I go out for some sake to celebrate my return? Tsunade snorted at the toad hermit's self-importance. Never in a million years, you perverted bastard. I swore an oath that no matter what life held for me, I would never go out with you. Not even insulted, the hermit shrugged. Just as well, I suppose. I've been longing to get back to the bathhouses, anyway. Jiraiya was forced to quickly vacate the room as Tsunade began hurling objects. Soon once again by herself, Tsunade fumed. Jiraiya may have been a great ninja, but he was a fool of a man. The truth was, Tsunade grimly admitted to herself, was that sake sounded really good around now, but she had promised Shizune to try to keep it to a minimum. There were still a few papers left on her daily pile of paperwork, but Tsunade, standing up and putting on her green robe, headed out of her office towards her house for some much-needed shut-eye. Unlike the late Sandaime, Tsunade refused to reside at the Hokage mansion, and instead chose to live in a normal house, not in the upper-class district, where the Hyuga compound, elders' houses, and the now vacant Uchiha compound could be found, but closer to the market district, where the real Konoha citizens could be found. As she was walking, she turned a corner, she came across the last sight she ever wanted to see: Naruto being beaten up by some drunken villagers. Naruto almost laughed as a haymaker caused lights to explode before his was pathetic, really. Their punches were slow and sloppy, their movements drunken and obvious, but Naruto was not able to fight them off. They had him pinned, leaving him unable to use ninjutsu to escape. Taijutsu and weapons weren't an option, wasn't enemy ninja, it was drunken civilians, loyal Konoha residents who had drank one too many and decided to take their personal problems out on the village. Them simply wasn't an option, especially since there would surely be some slimeball elder in the village who would be more than happy to use a few beat-up drunks as a context to get him exiled or worse. A sharp kick to the ribs broke Naruto out of his reverie. They had gotten some rocks as well and were really beginning to do some real damage. Naruto could feel more bones beginning to crack, which is hardly surprising. What was surprising to Naruto was the sensation of the beating suddenly stopping, as he heard a familiar voice yelling in rage. Tsunade was upon them like a cat among very drunk field mice, throwing punches left and right. It was actually lucky for them she was in a blind rage, as Tsunade's strength, when magnified by her perfect chakra control, would have been more than enough to kill them instantly. As it was, there were 7 bleeding and concussed men laying in the street in under half a minute. Naruto tried his best to look straight at his savior, but his vision blurred as he began to lose consciousness. What he saw did not make complete sense. A tall, glowing silhouette of a woman, features indistinct, obscured by golden hair, knelt protectively over him, holding him in her arms. He croaked out the only thing his brain could compute, punch drunk as he was at the moment. "Ka-san," was all he was able to mutter before blacking out. Tsunade quickly bent over Naruto and ascertained his injuries. It was pretty bad, with multiple fractures and bruises all over. There were many cuts, the attackers thinking of arming themselves before attacking. She couldn't stand the thought of Naruto, the person to restore her hope, bleeding. Her fear of blood threatening to resurface, she steeled herself and picked him up. The hospital would be running on graveyard shift staff only, and was too far away at that. With the speed of a veteran ninja, traversed the rooftops to her house. As one of the greatest physicians of her time, she could do more for him right away than the hospital staff could. Meanwhile, Naruto was struggling internally, his unconscious trying to piece together information of what just happened. Someone saved me? But who? It felt like my mother. No, she died giving birth to me. But it definitely seemed like a motherly figure, protecting me from harm. The concern, the protectiveness, the love and the sorrow, Naruto could not figure out who saved him. Maybe it was my imagination, maybe I'm still in the street, bleeding to death, and this is my mind's way of handling it? His mind screamed into the darkness. Damn you, Fox, so this is how it ends, 13 years of struggling, only to die the night I get back at the hands of drunks? Is this what you want? The darkness quickly gave way to a world of red. People Naruto had studied under, like Kakashi and Jiraiya, had assumed that since the Kyuubi would offer its power in order to preserve its host's life, that they were somehow symbiotic, that for Naruto it was a useful thing, a conscious reservoir or container of chakra, to be used whenever seen fit. The truth was somewhat bleaker. The Kyuubi was a ravenous creature, an embodiment of rage, eager to whip everything in a sea of flames. The Kyuubi was not a secret weapon. It was a living time bomb. But the demon knew better than to attempt its escape while Naruto was still young and weak. Such an attempt would be akin to trying to escape a prison cell by knocking down a supporting wall. For now, the fox towed the line, silently cursing the human for putting the both of them in such a situation. Had the boy merely been willing to kill a few worthless humans, they wouldn't be in the current situation. Nevertheless, demonic chakra within Naruto knitted his bones together and began to close the numerous gashes. Tsunade quickly laid Naruto down on her bed as soon as she entered her apartment. Shedding her green gambler jacket, she quickly retrieved a medical kit in the adjacent room and quickly returned. Removing his clothes, which were by now caked red with dry blood, she examined him in detail. I should have known. His wounds are already beginning to heal. But that doesn't mean he is in the clear yet. Getting out a container of antibiotic pain relief salve, she began rubbing it into his wounds. Many of the cuts could easily infect, otherwise. It made Tsunade sick to her stomach that this could happen. More upsetting was the thought that it was probably not the first time, either. Closing her eyes, she remembered that dark day, 13 years ago. Arashi Kazama, the Yodem of Konoha, and the first foreigner to ever attain rank of Kage in the entire continent, had, in his waning moments, entrusted his newborn son with the awesome responsibility of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, hoping that the lifetime of wine, women and song that Naruto would surely receive as a beloved hero of Konoha, could somehow make up for his being orphaned. Things obviously did not go according to the Yodaim's last wish. The salve worked quickly, causing the bruises to fade. However, her rubbing got an unexpected result, as Naruto's member rose to full attention, as, even unconscious, the instincts within Naruto responded to the stimulation of Tsunade's massage. "Oh, my," was all that Tsunade could say, as she looked down at Naruto. At that moment, a series of thoughts ran through her head in quick succession. First was the knee-jerk reaction of embarrassment, then triumph as she realized that Naruto would not have responded in such a way if he was still in pain, marking her treatment as a success. A few seconds later, another realization hit Tsunade. He was large for his age. Taking into account his youth, and the fact he had just begun to hit his growth spurts yet, it was amazing. Perhaps it was something inherited from the Yondaime? He was not outrageous in his endowment, but nevertheless stood favorably to an average grown man. There was a small sense of pride in Tsunade as well. Naruto typically claimed her to be a dried-up hag, but it was she who had made Naruto feel this way simply by touching him gently. That then led to another link in her chain of responses, guilt. Not only for her last thought, but for the fact that Naruto would react so extremely to comforting touch. It occurred to her that the only sensation his body was used to from others was abuse. This led to a final thought, a quiet, sly thought that had rested dormant in the back of her head for almost a year and a half now, ever since she had met Naruto, that now drew louder and louder in the back of her mind as she struggled with its implications. I couldn't, could I? Of course not, I'm 4 times his age, the very idea is sick, but, then again, why not? Would it be so bad to make someone who had suffered so much feel good for once? I need this as well, I've been alone so long. Slowly, uncertainty, she inched her hand down his chest, down his stomach, and right as it was about to wrap around Naruto's member, the familiar voice of a curious boy caused the Godaimes to bolt upright in shock. Tsunade Bakken, what are you doing? Naruto. I can explain. Standing there, being stared at quizzically by Naruto, Tsunade was mortified. Tears began to form in her eyes as, overwhelmed by guilt, she tried to explain herself. Naruto, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me, I wasn't thinking, I swear. Naruto closed his eyes and tilted his head to the side, as if he was in deep thought for a few moments, then shrugged his shoulders. It's all right, Ba-chan. No big deal. What? Was all the flabbergasted Hokage could manage. How could anyone be so casual about nearly being robbed of their innocence? I said it's okay. Naruto reaffirmed. Tsunade stood dumbfounded in front of the young ninja. Did he not see what she did? Was he that naive? Naruto, the Godem began slowly. You may be too young to realize, but I was about to take advantage of you. Naruto looked completely unfazed by the statement, merely raising one eyebrow as if her statement was the most obvious thing on earth, before simply answering, so? Naruto, how can you not care? Tsunade burst out, nearly sobbing at this point. Naruto got up off the bed and moved over to Tsunade, who took a step back uncertainly, her guilt obvious on her face. And why should I care about you touching me a little? Geez Ba-chan, after what those villager idiots were trying to do, I'm just happy to be in one piece. Gently placing a hand on her shoulder, he led the still shaky Godem and sat her on the end of the bed, as he stood next to her, their heads now level. He looked into her dark brown eyes, still tearing a little in the corners, and gave one of his famous grins and said, Look, Tsunade Bon. I know deep down you'd never try to hurt me. You're one of the people who are precious to me. As a matter of fact, I've touched you like me enough, think of me that way. Tsunade wiped her eyes, trying to come to terms with what the spiky-haired youth was saying. It was unreal. The idea that he might not be upset seemed too good to be true. But even so, she continued. What I did was still wrong. I easily could have traumatized you, and you are still a child. Naruto shook his head sadly as he interrupted. Traumatize me? Not a chance. This village excels at handing me crap, but I've survived it so far, so I highly doubt you could ever do any worse. Now that I think about it, I really should have counted on those drunks wanting to ambush me on my day back. It was a tactical error on my part for not seeing it coming. I was just lucky you came along. And second of all, Bon, technically I'm an adult too. The Sandaime let me sign papers making me a legal adult. I've even owned my own apartment since I was 7. At first I didn't understand, but I came to realize that, politically speaking, Ojiazen's hands were tied otherwise. He couldn't really do anything for me, without pissing of the village council. So the best he could do was give me independence and as much money as he could spare. It was actually pretty sweet. I didn't have to put up with a bunch of bull crap from the orphanage, plus I was eligible for a minimum allowance from the government. And once I became genin, I became an adult in the eyes of the ninja community, as you well know. Now, I'm an adult, so I can decide for myself what I do and do not perceive as harassment, and I do not view your actions as harassment. You saved me from people who would have killed me. With this he looked her directly in the eyes, piscine blue meeting soft brown. I trust you, and I know you would never try to hurt me. Someone as strong as you could have made me do whatever you wanted, asleep or not. But all you did was touch me a little. At this moment Naruto's voice faltered for a moment, before adding quietly. My only question, however, is, Kano, you could have just patched me up and sent me home, so why me? There are other guys out there that are way stronger and more popular. This time it was Tsunade's turn to interrupt. But they aren't you, Naruto. It was you who revived my belief in Konoha, even winning my grandfather's necklace from me. And if it weren't for you, I would probably be in a casino somewhere, half drunk and broke. I truly admire you, and the truth is, I've just been so lonely ever since Dan died, and when I saw you there, in danger, all alone, I don't know what came over me. The more I think about it, the more I realize that I may have had feelings for you, at least unconsciously, since you defended me from Kabuto. I tried to cover it up, even to myself, because at first I was unsure of how I felt about you, and how Shizune would feel if I took interest. You see, she is Dan's surviving niece, as well as one of my dearest friends and students. I would never want her to feel that I had forgotten Dan, or no longer honored his memory. But it's become clear to me that I need to move on, and your compassion and strength filled me with admiration, and on reflection, desire. I have feelings for you, Naruto, but I'm genuinely afraid of what it may mean for us. Once again Naruto donned a look of concentration, as if he were judging every fact from every possible angle. 5 seconds later he spoke up. Well, I like you a lot, and obviously you like me, so it all really comes down to one question then, why don't you be my girlfriend? Tsunade sat in shocked silence for a moment. A small smirk appeared on her lips, which grew into a chuckle, then hearty laughter. This was one of the reasons she was so attracted to him. He was able to take the direst circumstances and make them seem like common occurrences. You make it sound so easy, Naruto. As if I could just snap my fingers and make people accept us being together. Naruto crossed his arms and looked thoughtful for a moment, before saying, well, isn't it kinda like that? I mean, you're a Hokage at a time of post-war, and the village is still fragile, with the only other Hokage candidate being Ero Sennin, who I know for a fact would rather chew off an arm than assume leadership. Oji-san once told me that the Hokage is the central pillar of the village. Anyone who would try to get you fired just for being my girlfriend would be seen as aiding the Sound Village. The smile on the Hokage's lips softened from humor to contemplation. You're serious about this, aren't you? Dat Bayo. I'm sick of being alone, and since you feel the same, and you said you like me, why not? Tsunade lowered her head in silence for 5 full minutes, the only noise being the soft buzzing of insects outside, as thoughts running rampart through her mind again, and slowly, a smile formed again on her face, a smile of confidence, as she often had when behind her desk giving orders, the smile of a gambler, willing to lay it all on the line to get what she wants. Okay, Naruto-kun, I'll be your girlfriend, but I'm going to have to lay down some ground rules. Ground rules? Like what? First of all, I want to address what I did tonight. I will never let myself make that mistake again. I want you to know here and now that I will absolutely not pressure you in this. If you want to go back to being professionals, Hokage and Genin, at any time, just say so. I would never be able to live with myself if I thought I was coercing you. Now that I think about it, I got to admit the idea of a medic nin like you trying to play doctor with me was kind of funny, but I would hardly call our interaction in the past as professional, unless you count an insults and name-calling as professional. Very funny, Naruto, but seriously. Second of all, even if we eventually go public with it, we can't go telling people right away. I need to do some political chicanery. Chica, what now? Chicanery, you know, as in subterfuge. I'm going to have to manipulate the political system so that you become the most practical successor to me as Hokage. The closer we are to each other when we tell people of any liaisons, the more natural it will seem. And to top it off, not only will we get to spend time together, but you will receive vital training in the day-to-day duties of Hokage. You sure this isn't all just some huge scam to get me to help you with your paperwork, Ba-chan? The youth intoned sarcastically. No, it isn't, and that brings us to the final rule. No more calling me Ba-chan, now or ever again. If we are to be together romantically, more appropriate names are in order, right, Naruto-kun? Yeah, I guess, but I'll need time to think of a good one though. Will Tsunade-chan do for now? Of course, that name would be just fine. In the back of her mind a lone dirty thought buzzed. Well, he did call me Ka-san before he passed out. Perhaps someday soon we could roleplay, I'll be able to get him to call me that again, and again, and again, hee. Quickly banishing the perverted thought back into the naughty part of her mind whence it came, she stood up and got her gambler coat back on. Ahem. Well anyway, if you're okay with the plan I've laid out, I think I should take you back to your apartment. You'll need as much rest as you can get before I announce your apprenticeship tomorrow. Tsunade-chan, not sure how to break this to you. I know I just got back to the village, and everything, but given what happened to me tonight, there's a 95% chance my apartment is trashed. Tsunade sighed bitterly at this revelation, rubbing her temples to ward off any oncoming headaches, both of frustration for her newfound, and for herself at the prospect of the paperwork the insurance claims would create. All right, you get some rest here then. As your clothes are pretty much ruined, I'll see to that you have some fresh, fitting clothes for the morning. There's a tailor that owes me a favor that's opens early a few blocks down. I'll be back in time to wake you up, at which time you'll need to get going before Shizune comes to wake me. I'll break the news to her quietly and discreetly tomorrow. I believe she will understand, but nevertheless, it wouldn't be tactful if she came by in the morning and found you in my bed. Naruto yawned, fatigue catching up with him. Thanks, I am kinda tired, so we were up all night talking, huh? With this he eased himself back into the bed, dozing off almost immediately. As Tsunade slipped on her heeled sandals and got up to go, the half-asleep boy spoke, barely above a whisper. Thank you, Tsunade-chan, for everything. You're welcome, Naruto-kun, I'll wake you up when it's morning. With this she walked out into the lit streets, an unusual spring in her step. 2 hours later, the Godem walked into her office, surprising almost everyone on the morning shift. Hokage-sama? You sure are early today. Normally Shizune-san has to bring you in around noon. Well, I didn't get much sleep, and besides today is a very important day. Could arrange for a meeting between myself, Jiraiya, the Junin instructors and the village elders this afternoon, if you could, please. And also, when you see Shizune, please direct her to my office, there is a personal matter I need to discuss with her. Slipping out just as the sun began coming up 4 hours after falling asleep, the still groggy Naruto made his way, first to his house, then to the Hokage Tower. Just as he had suspected, his apartment had undergone significant vandalism the last night, with almost every window broken and more than a few dead foxes littering the floor. They sure loved to be direct, he reflected, as he left for Ichiraku's ramen shop to fill his stomach. What followed for him was a day mostly filled with insurance claims, catnapping and discounted ramen. Old man Ichiraku was a sympathetic soul, letting have ramen almost for free upon finding out what happened to his favorite customer's house. In the evening a Chunin messenger came around to tell him that the Godem wanted to see his as soon as possible. Upon reaching the office, he found her alone at the desk. Did everything go all right? Tsunade-chan? I think so. Shizune was a bit upset at first, but I think she just needs a little time to get used to the idea. As for the village elders, I backed them into a situation wherein they must accept you as my new protege, replacing Sakura. I threatened to abandon my post as Hokage if they did not accept. Much like you predicated, they caved in once they realized Jiraiya would have no intentions of replacing me. What about Sakura-san? Doesn't this sort of sabotage her career as a medic nin? As a medic nin, maybe, but I feel that someone who lacks compassion really wasn't qualified to become a high-level medic nin. When I found out about how she responded to your return, I felt that having her around would be detrimental, and anyway it's not as if I'm ruining her life. I've given her a good reference, so she can always find employment as a nurse or orderly at the hospital. If anything, such a subpar kunoichi should be so lucky as to be guided away from a genuinely dangerous lifestyle. So, then I'm in? Yes, starting tomorrow you will be helping me with my paperwork, as well as helping me to greet and entertain dignitaries from the village hidden in the grass when they arrive in the afternoon. Also, I informed Kakashi that his team was officially dissolved. Kakashi-sensei always paid too much attention to Sasuke Teme anyway, but what do I do for new jutsus now? I don't want to become a pencil pusher, and besides, I have to be on a team to participate in Chunin exams. I know, let me explain. I know you probably think paperwork and diplomacy is boring, so to help you ease into your new duties, I've arranged it so that you're now free to join as an add-on to any team you wish, provided you have the instructors and all teammates' permission. This will allow you more fluidity in your instruction. For example, taijutsu training with Guy, genjutsu training with Kurenai, you get the idea. Naruto was practically leaping up and down in unbridled enthusiasm at this point. Kick-ass, at this rate, I'm gonna become Hokage so fast it'll make everyone's head spin. Alright, settle down. I'm glad you're happy, but it's getting late, let's head back home and get some rest. Huh? Oh, that's right, after receiving your insurance claims for the damage done to your house, it decided to let you move in until the repairs are finished. So we're roomies now? Well, we are boyfriend and girlfriend now, right, Naruto-kun? So then there's nothing wrong with it. And I certainly won't stand by while my cute new boyfriend gets hassled and vandalized by bullies. An almost imperceptible smile developed, as Tsunade proposed her next idea. Tell you what say we go get dinner at that ramen place you like so much, then we'll head back to my place for dessert. Yeah, Ichiraku ramen is the best. What will we be having for dessert? You'll see. In the meantime, as the sun began setting on another day in the ninja village of Konohagire, the gears of fate made another of their quirky turns, as a certain trench coat and fishnet wearing sadist began filling out a Junin instructor job application form. Anko Mitarashi was the kind of woman who, when faced with problems, retreated into work. But this time, she was seeking a change of pace. After all, she reasoned, it was the work that she did as being a supposed torturer and assassin that earned her the stares and hatred she was so sick of. Being Orochimaru's former apprentice didn't help either, she grimaced. Most people would not go within 10 feet of her if she was walking down the street, and for all the men that approached her, every last one ran away like a coward upon getting to know her. She reflected that she would do anything to keep her mind off her frustrations, even a technical lowering of rank, from special Junin to Junin instructor would be a relief, as long as teaching would take her mind of her troubles. And as an added bonus, she mused with a grin, that cute kid whose blood tasted so good from the Chunin exam was back, and from what she had heard, technically without a team, so there was always a chance. And at the exact same moment, across town, a quiet, pale-eyed girl sat in her room in the Hyuga compound filling out a team transfer form. Although she was never one to seek out conflict, the fact was that she just couldn't take her team anymore. After her father's morning lecturing ran late, she had traveled to the training ground where her sensei then lectured her for being tardy. It was like she was completely unsympathetic to others' problems. The adult were sometimes overheard calling her Ice Princess, and upon getting to know her for a year and a half, Hinata decided the name was fairly apt. Her teammates were annoying too. One self-centered to the point of being offensive, the other a blank slate, both gave no concrete support for her endeavors at all, other than the obligatory, good for you, or half-hearted, don't give up. Completely disheartened, she began training with them that morning in combat practice. One Dynamic marking, mishap later. She was resolved to join a different team after all. Boys who either had fleas or seemed to be robots were just not for her. And now that her beloved had returned and would need new teammates, after Uchiha had left and the Haruno bitch thankfully never had any interest, there was a chance. Naruto sneezed twice as he lay in Tsunade's bed, both basking in post-coitus glow, her taller form snuggling up behind him, her bountiful bosom pressing against the back of his head. "Man, I'd better not be getting a cold," he mumbled. As her hands subconsciously wrapped around him gently, he leaned his head against what was rapidly becoming his favorite new pillows. His last thoughts before falling asleep was, "I'm so happy I found Tsunade-chan, who really loves me, but truthfully, had someone told me a year ago this was going to happen, I would have laughed in their face. Well, at least things are looking up for the both of us, and at least I know things couldn't possibly get any weirder than the last 2 days." With this, Naruto joined his lover in slumber, both content for the first time in a long while. It would take 3 days and 11 hours, the amount of time it would take Anko and Hinata's paperwork to be processed, for Naruto Uzumaki to find out just how weird things could really get. Thank you for once again reading my work. I am Unlikely Love Unlimited, and this is 3 stars. I profusely apologize to anyone I kept waiting. I ran into a series of unfortunate setbacks. From now on, however, updating will likely happen on a far more regular schedule. Barring spring midterms, or course. Once again before we begin I would like to remind the readers that this story deals with mature and sometimes UAL themes. If you don't want anything of that nature in your reading, please hit the back button. And as always I would remind you that this is a work of fanfiction and parody. I own none of the characters. Duh. Above the hidden village of Konohagakure, scattered snowflakes drifted lazily from an overcast sky, blanketing the world in white and heralding a beautiful winter's day for the village's residents. Half a year had passed since the humid summer night when the Godem Hokage and the outcast ninja known as Uzumaki Naruto had conspired to be together as a couple, despite social convention and personal risk. So far they have done quite well. Naruto's life was slowly improving in quality, although his responsibilities grew as well. "Hey, Naruto, you're late. You know how the Hokage gets when she has to do the evening paperwork by herself," yelled a Chunin currently standing guard at the entrance to the Hokage's tower. I know, the fair-haired youth yelled out as he sped past him, into the tower. Dashing up the stairs he stopped just short of the office door. "Tell the Hokage that I'm here for my lessons, will ya?" he said quickly to the Ambu stationed at the door. Nodding his head, the Ambu opened the door to announce Naruto's arrival, just in time to dodge a rather large book that came flying past. Naruto crept into the office. Papers were spilled over the floor and an extremely frustrated woman was inside digging through a pile, tossing ones she didn't need over her shoulder. The guard quickly shut the door behind Naruto so no other scholarly projectiles could get to him. His job was no picnic, the guard reflected, but he didn't envy Naruto, either. He may have been a brat and a hassle, but even the dreaded Foxchild didn't deserve having to work directly under that woman every day. The guard shuddered at the thought. Still, more power to him. The guard thought. It wasn't every person who was groomed to become the next leader of Konoha. Meanwhile said Foxchild approached the desk where his lover rummaged though numerous important-looking documents. "Hey Tsunade-chan, it's 7 o'clock, I'm here for my lessons." Tsunade grunted without looking up. Sure, go grab a chair. I'll be with you as soon as I grab this stupid contract." Naruto took a seat and began organizing some of the papers on the desk. It was a good thing he was around, he thought bemusedly, ever since Shizune decided to open up her own private medical practice. Tsunade seemed lost at her job, now being without a secretary. And in the end that was what Naruto had more or less become in recent months. The village was taken in by Tsunade's deft political maneuverings, leaving the now 14-year-old Naruto as the sole possible successor for Hokage, for Tsunade had proclaimed that due to personal conflict between her career and personal life, she would step down from her role in a mere 3 years' time, leaving not enough time for another candidate, even among the Junins, whose ranks were still painfully thin after the sound invasion, to present themselves in the village's ninja population. But enough time to mold Naruto into a respected leader. As such all of the civilian population and most of the ninja population no longer questioned their daily proximity to one another. This plan would of course make her protégé a young Hokage of 17 years. Almost unheard of, but not impossible to accomplish, as Gaara of the Sand had already ascended to Kazekage at the age of 14. To become Hokage at such a young age, however, meant a lot of hard work for Naruto, who every evening would spend his time learning diplomacy and etiquette from his beloved Tsunade, who despite her closeness was quite demanding in his instruction. There were mountains of papers every day, from mission submissions to legislation from the council, and every day, Tsunade would save some more of the difficult ones for her, Naruto-kun, to handle. "Okay, I found it." Tsunade grinned triumphantly as she went over to her now organized desk and plopped a medium scroll down. "What's this?" "It's a new trade agreement for this upcoming year. Namely for trading rights with some mining towns, some of which could be considered on the border with the Earth Nation. So price negotiations will include them as well. Just great. From what I've read on the Earth Nation, most of their negotiators are ancient fogies that have lived through the Leaf Rock War. Those guys are rude as hell and impossible to negotiate with." "Are you suggesting that I'm ancient, Naruto?" Tsunade said half-jokingly, half-threateningly. No, Naruto quickly stammered. "I'm just saying there is still bad blood between the Fire and Earth countries. And if we don't get good terms on these agreements, the price on almost all ninja tools in Fire Country could as much as double. Well, then, let's have a look and see if we can't find a village on this map over here, smaller than the others that might be willing to sell cheaper. If we can set up contracts with them, the other villages will have to lower their prices to stay competitive. Of course, we will have to pretend as if we couldn't care either way, otherwise they will catch on and raise their prices to match. Pay attention, Naruto, a good Hokage can do more than just deceive his opponents in battle, but at the negotiating tables as well. Manipulating supply and demand effectively can lower cost for imports." And so the Hokage lectured her, "Student," as Naruto fought to keep his eyes open. 3 hours later their work was completed. Tsunade grinned with satisfaction. "Well, this seems in order, I'll send it out tomorrow. Let's head home." Putting on her favorite green robe, she and Naruto walked out of the office. As they made their way to Tsunade's house, Naruto reflected on the work they had done that day. It had all bored him to tears, but he put up with it for 2 reasons. The first being that it was quickly shaping him into a mentally quick and savvy politician, able to memorize treaties and spot flaws in them, as well as almost instantly figuring out which of the village's available ninja were best for any missions Konoha received. The other reason for Naruto's unusual patience was that Tsunade's hard businesslike exterior would crumble as soon as work was over, and she would reward him with 2 of his favorite things every night after work: a home-cooked ramen dinner and an intimate night together. He had come to long for those scant few hours in the late night where they would make passionate love to each other. For as much as Naruto deemed himself a gentleman and not a pervert like Jiraiya, he had to admit to himself that he was in love with one of the most beautiful, strong, willful, kind and generous lovers a man could ever want. Every night was a little different. Sometimes slow and achingly sensual, other times rushed and frenzied. Control was also always shifting, for although Tsunade was taller and much stronger than her partner, and enjoyed being on top, she treated him as an equal in the bedroom, despite his inexperience, sometimes just laying back and allowing Naruto to experiment. She would moan and gasp as he nibbled, licked, kissed, and caressed her body, finding the best ways to please her. And in the end it didn't matter what they did in those scant few hours, or even how they did it, as long as they did it together. And so they did. The one thing that was always the same was the closeness. That would always be face to face, kissing as they went. It was a nightly ritual that had begun once they began living together on a permanent basis. Naruto's apartment had been condemned when safety inspectors examined his vandalized house and had found it unsafe to live in. Apparently when he had moved in, the place was infested with cockroaches and termites, and the landlord never bothered to mention the fact to him. At Tsunade's insistent urging, Naruto then moved into his girlfriend, boss's apartment, until you find a new place. Which was tacitly understood to be never, as no landlord in the village really wanted the infamous prankster as a tenant, and Tsunade was just as happy with having her love as a housemate. The village's reaction to their living arrangements was surprisingly indifferent. The Hokage finally has that troublesome fox on a short leash, they would say. Most were relieved that due to some miracle on the Godime's part, Naruto was growing up and ceasing his pranks. The initial objections of the elders at the Kyuubi, being Tsunade's choice for student successor, when meeting with no results from the public and fierce opposition from the Hokage, eventually burned out. Now all that remained was the occasional grumble from the impotent council. To the whole village it seemed that the scoundrel monster was being molded into a fine shinobi, all due to the slug Sanin's influence. There were less cold eyes as Naruto walked the streets, and more nods of acknowledgement. But naturally, the whole village was still ignorant of the extent of their relationship. They had decided to keep it a secret until Naruto became Hokage, at which point he would have the prestige and influence to be with whomever he so chose, although Tsunade had once personally confided in Naruto that if it were up to her, she would drag him to the center of the marketplace, and make love to him in the middle of the dirt road there for all the world to see, but for now, they kept it a tightly held secret, one which only came to light in the form of late nights stretched into the pre-dawn hours by two people so very much in love. But those nightly respites only lasted so long, before the sun began climbing the sky again and the dozing couple would have to rouse themselves and head to their work. Tsunade would go off to her office and Naruto would head to the training grounds, to his new Junin instructor, Anko Mitarashi. She had gotten her wish when she had sent in the paperwork to become a Junin instructor in the late summer, and she now had her own two-man, elite, team studying under her consisting of Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga, the boy being groomed to become Hokage, and the heir of the Hyuga main branch respectively, two of the most prestigious genin in all of Konoha. The team was very effective, despite the wild difference in temperaments. Hinata for once never felt like she was being ignored, as although Anko was far more abrasive and rough than Kurenai ever could have dreamt of being, she was also active in their training, giving constant feedback and in her own scary kind of way, encouragement. And Naruto finally had a sensei that didn't hold back giving him powerful jutsu. By the end of their first 2 weeks training, Naruto had mastered the Shadow Snake's technique and Hinata had learned to meld the speed and accuracy of her Hyuga-style Jukin to fiercer brawling styles. Now not only did her strikes hit fast, she also hit hard, doing far more damage per hit than even her cousin Neji could accomplish. The students also brought out positive qualities in the teacher. Hinata was competent and responsive to directions, although sometimes too shy and apologetic for Anko's taste, but nevertheless had great combat potential, which Anko brought out of her, much to her family's approval. Naruto was the opposite. Instead of shying away and following orders without question, he would often butt heads with his sensei. A typical conversation could run anywhere from a disagreement on assassination tactics to which was better, ramen or dango. They would always find something to argue about, yet neither would truly be angry with each other. Much like at the ramen shop half a year ago, Anko and Naruto's aggressiveness formed a kind of effortless communication. They were always able to understand each other's feelings. In addition, his stubborn never-say-die attitude allowed him to persevere tough any training exercise or the toughest mission. So far, the elite team's success only added to Naruto's gradual acceptance by, if not the Konoha general populace, the ninja community. The following day at the end of practice, Naruto and Hinata were exhausted as usual. Anko had worked them both to the bone using repeated exercise drills and relentless jutsu practice. Looking at the position of the sun, Naruto gasped out loud. "Damn it, it's already 6 o'clock already. You worked us too long today, Anko-sensei, I'm gonna be late." "Then be late. Get one thing straight, Uzumaki, you're only going to get better if you practice. I'm not sure what Hokage-sama is thinking wanting you to be her protege, but because you are being considered the Hokage must be the strongest of all the village shinobi, and by a wide margin I might add. You'll do little good to Konoha as another bureaucratic pencil pusher. Yeah, I'm plenty strong already. And by the time Tsunade-sama decides to retire, I'll be the greatest Hokage ever. Big talk, little man. Just get going. We will meet back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp. More drills. I'm going to put in a request for B-ranked missions for our group in about a week, so keep your body and mind sharp in the meantime." With practice over, Naruto sped down the road toward the Hokage Tower at top speed. After a few minutes though, he slowed down, as he heard Hinata as she came running after him. What's wrong, Hinata-chan? I wanted to ask you something earlier but you ran off as soon as practice ended. So what's up? At this Hinata began tapping her index fingers together. Naruto-kun. I was wondering if Tsunade-sama was looking to have another medical nin apprentice. I know that Sakura-san studied under her for a while, and since you are her student I was wondering. Ah, I get it. Trying to get away from Anko-sensei, No, not at all. In fact, I think Anko-sensei is the best teacher I've ever had. She doesn't really know a lot about herbs and medicine, just poisons. And I've always been interested in medicine more than fighting, despite my family's wishes for me to be a warrior. I got an idea, since I'm heading to see Tsunade-chan right now. You can talk to her about it face to face. Oh, no I couldn't. It wouldn't be my place to. But before she could voice her protests, Naruto had taken her by the hand and had begun running towards the Hokage's tower again. Secretly, a part of Hinata was thrilled that Naruto was holding her hand. Although from a practical standpoint, she legitimately wanted to become a medic nin, she would have been lying to herself if it wasn't partly about being around the young man she adored all day as well. However, she was also mortified that she was about to ask the Hokage for such a large favor. As they ran, a thought occurred to Hinata, as to what Naruto had said when referring to the Godem. Tsunade-chan. He calls the Hokage, Tsunade-chan. Weird? And with that, Naruto, with Hinata in tow, sped off to the Hokage tower, trying desperately to be on time. At the office, Naruto and Tsunade both chatted with an amicable ease that seemed to be more relaxed than an average teacher and student, once or twice even finishing each other's sentences. And as it turned out, Tsunade was more than happy to hear the young Hyuga out, and agreed that even a two-person group should have a medic nin in it. With a promise to meet at a later day to pound out the details, Hinata excused herself. While walking away from the tower in the direction of the Hyuga compound, Hinata stopped dead in her tracks. Her internal, Naruto stock-o-meter, was going full tilt. Turning around and sitting on a nearby bench, she activated her Byakugan and watched the tower. Evening was setting in and most people were heading home for dinner. Although she would sure be lectured by her father for not coming home on time, she wanted to find out what her personal hero was learning from the most famous kunoichi in the 5 nations, and perhaps learn about the Godaime's teaching style. By the time Naruto and Tsunade left together at around 11 at night, Hinata's curiosity had been roused into jealous suspicion. Perhaps it was all in her imagination, but when in the office they had acted like teacher and student, but as they walked to their house they seemed far closer. It didn't help that Tsunade's left hand was dangerously close to grabbing Naruto's rear as they walked. As she followed them at a safe distance, her suspicions heightened. In the old days, Naruto would always go to Ichiraku after his work was done, even if they were closing up. She knew this through stalking Naruto extensively of course, but instead they were now heading directly back to the Hokage's house, and at an almost hurried rate. She had heard that he was living in the same house as the Hokage since his apartment had been torn down. Waiting 15 minutes after they entered the house, she activated her Byakugan again, and her heart leapt to her throat as her most paranoid fear came to life. A small heap of clothes lay on the floor. On the couch, the Godem and Naruto were kissing each other passionately as their hands explored each other. Hinata felt like her world had just been shattered. All of Hinata's doubt and self-loathing, which had been worn away by degrees since Naruto's return, came rushing back. How could she have been so blind? What had made her think for a second that she had a chance, if he was already involved with the strongest woman in the world? And the worst realization of all came when she saw the look in each of their eyes. They were, without a doubt, truly in love. Breaking into tears, Hinata ran off blindly down the road, sobbing. Naruto's head jerked up at the sound. Oh, crap, I think someone is outside. Sighing and shaking her head, Tsunade got up and began dressing. Yes, and I have a fairly good idea who, too. It was Hinata. The Hokage said calmly. Hinata? So she saw us? We've got to talk to her before she tells anyone. No, Naruto, you go alone. I'll stay here. If she saw me right now I think things would be made even worse. Why is that? You really are dense sometimes, aren't you, Naruto? She has a crush on you. What? Naruto looked at Tsunade, thunderstruck. Right now she must hate me so much. Tsunade mused. Oh, Kami, I had no idea. Tsunade sighed deeply. But almost everyone else in the village did, including myself, and it seems I have allowed my private life and duties as Hokage to come into conflict. I mistakenly thought I could keep our relationship a secret, while simultaneously allowing Hinata the benefits of becoming a medic nin under my tutelage, but I was wrong. I guess she intuited that something was odd between us, and she followed us. So this awkward situation is really my fault. Don't blame yourself, Tsunade-chan. I will find Hinata and I'll convince her to keep us a secret. With that, Naruto quickly dressed and headed out the door in pursuit of Hinata. Looking around, Hinata found herself by the edge of one of Konoha's numerous wooded areas. Cold, alone and utterly miserable, she leaned up against a tree, sniffling and weeping quietly. Hearing a rustle in the nearby grass, Hinata turned and saw a figure gathering moss from the side of an adjacent tree. Who's there? Hinata squeaked out. The figure stiffened and turned in Hinata's direction. That voice, Hinata Hyuga? Is that you? What are you doing out here? It's past midnight. As the figure continued to approach, Hinata recognized the speaker. Shizune-sama? Shizune, medical ninja and former disciple of the slug Sannin Tsunade, stood in front of the cold, tired and distraught Hyuga. Hinata, what are you doing out here at this time of night? You'll catch your death. Looking closer, she saw the pale-eyed girl was crying. By Kami, what happened to you? Are you alright? I just got a little lost is all. I'm fine, really. The young Hyuga sniffed as she shivered from the winter's night chill. You don't look fine to me. Stay out in the snow any longer and you'll get sick. There are dry clothes and a warm fire waiting for us, so let's go. Hinata's eyebrows rose in realization as she asked a question of her own. You're camping out in the middle of winter? Shizune smiled softly at the girl's inquisitiveness. I'll tell you what, when we get back to my campsite I'll tell you all about it. As much as Hinata didn't feel like being with anyone right then, she had to admit dry clothes sounded nice. Picking herself up, she began walking with Shizune. After 15 minutes of trudging through the snow, Hinata found herself inside a tent, wearing a set of dry, if slightly oversized clothes that Shizune had brought along, sipping instant tea that the helpful medical ninja had prepared. Setting down her basket of herbs and mosses, Shizune poured herself a cup. Now that you finally have some color in your face, why don't you really tell me why you were out in the woods at this hour? I highly doubt that someone with one of the village's most effective tracking dojutsus could get lost while still inside Konoha's gates. Shifting uncomfortably, Hinata quickly attempted to change the subject. Excuse me, Shizune-san, but what were you doing out in the woods? Those plants you were gathering, wouldn't it be safer to do it during the day? Shizune smiled softly. Believe it or not, there are some rare medicinal herbs that are only potent when picked at night. Even in the chill of winter, they wither during the day. I run my own clinic now, and I was collecting medicine for it when I came across you. You actually gave me quite a scare. If I hadn't heard you crying I might have walked right past you and you'd have been a popsicle by morning. What would possess you to do something like that? I just needed some time alone is all. Shizune absent-mindedly tapped one finger against her chin, attempting a guess as to the girl's problems. Although the girl was notoriously thin-skinned, clearly something significant had her upset. Sitting down next to Hinata, she smiled reassuringly. You know, whatever the problem is, you can tell me. You promise you won't tell anyone? Doctor-patient confidentiality. I swear it. So what is the problem? More problems at home? Would you like to talk about that? I also heard that you had a falling out with Kurenai-san. No, nothing like that. My family life is always a little strained, but never enough to cause me to run away. And as for Kurenai-sensei, well I know she is a good kunoichi, and maybe even a good teacher, but I never really felt like we made a connection. Anko-sensei is able to motivate me far better. No, the main problem I'm having, it's about Naruto-kun. As you may have heard, we are now in a team under Anko-sensei. When it happened I was really happy, because I thought that if we worked together enough he might notice me more. But just when I thought I was getting close to him, it turns out I was already too late. He's already seeing someone. Matters of the heart. And with Naruto no less, I see. At this Shizune's smile grew a bit rueful with understanding. So you know about Naruto and Tsunade-sama, then? Hinata was absolutely and completely taken aback. How did you know? Not saying anything for a moment, Shizune poured herself another cup of tea, and after taking a first sip, said. I've known about it for a while, actually. When they first began being together, about half a year ago, I was the only person they told. At first I was more than a little hurt. The woman I looked up to as a teacher and role model and even a kind of aunt, was risking her career and standing in the village getting involved with someone a third her age. And what's worse, I felt not only was I losing a mentor, but a little brother, too. But nevertheless I honored their secret, and as they grew closer and closer to each other, I slowly drifted out of their lives, eventually putting all of my energy into my studies, and began pursuing my own career in medicine, which is actually the very reason I'm out here tonight. Hinata looked on wide-eyed as Shizune talked. Shizune knew exactly what she was going through, having been set aside by Naruto and Tsunade's relationship as well. It was hard for the both of them. But for Hinata the sting was still fresh and unbearable, as Naruto still meant far more to her than she could put into words. The worst part, Hinata reflected, as she stared into the bottom of her teacup, was that she couldn't even fight for Naruto's affections. What chance did a 14-year-old introvert have against the legendary slug Sannin, be it in terms of charms, experience, or if it came down to it, body? Absolutely none. Hinata murmured, as much to herself as to Shizune, "Do you hate Tsunade-sama?" Shizune shook her head at that. "No, I could never hate Tsunade, but at first I was angry at them both, for risking everything in what I thought was simply a flight of fancy. But, as time passed I eventually came to understand that they were sincere in their feeling and pure in their motivations. They had simply fallen in love. And that is something that no one can control. They had never meant to hurt me. They just had to be true to themselves." Hinata sighed at this. "So, they really are in love, huh? I didn't want to believe it but I saw it in their eyes when they thought they were alone. What will I do now?" Her teacup empty, Shizune got out a small piece of parchment and began writing. Without looking up she said, "Well Hinata, that is really up to you, now isn't it? As for myself, I now have a successful career, not to mention a clinic with almost 100 patients that need caring for, and over 20 doctors and nurses in my employ. The truth was I could not study under Tsunade forever, so in a way it is just as well." "What do you mean, up to me? I couldn't never fairly win Naruto's heart away from Tsunade-sama. You said yourself they were truly in love, and as much as I would like to drive them apart, I can't do it, knowing it would hurt Naruto. And I know it sounds weak, but I don't think I can move on from him either. I love him with all my heart. At first I thought it was merely hero worship, but I honestly love him." Handing Hinata the roll of parchment she had been writing on, she said, "If you truly love him, then just love him, and don't worry about what you know can't be changed. Just concentrate on conveying your feelings to Naruto, and everything will take care of itself. Like I said before, a person can't help who they fall in love with. All you can do is be true to yourself. It seems to be working for them. I'm sure it will work for you, as well." All dried off now, Hinata nodded her head with a small amount of understanding, as she got up to leave. "Thank you, Shizune-sama. Talking with you has helped me a little." "You're welcome, Hinata. Your Byakugan should get you back to the Hyuga compound without incident, but just in case, take that signed letter to Hiyashi-san. It will explain that you were helping me gather herbs tonight. It should calm him down. The last thing we need is the Hyugas starting a manhunt, thinking you've been kidnapped. Take care of yourself Hinata." Once outside, Hinata activated her Byakugan, and realized she was in fact only a few miles from the Hyuga compound. Rushing home, she clutched the letter in her hand. Although she moved with speed to alleviate the anxiety of her family, her mind was elsewhere. She would have a lot to talk about with Naruto tomorrow, and Tsunade-sama as well. Naruto had returned home empty-handed, his searches for Hinata being unsuccessful. "Sorry, Tsunade-chan, I couldn't find her anywhere. She's not at the Hyuga compound, or any of the other places she normally hangs out at." "It's alright, Naruto-kun. With any luck, once she lets off some steam, she'll still show up to your team training tomorrow. You just contact her after practice and ask her to come to my office for an important meeting. She knows to put personal problems aside when it comes to her duty as a shinobi." Unlike myself, Tsunade added mentally. Hinata's not in trouble is she?" Naruto asked nervously. Tsunade looked out the window at the village street outside their house. "On the contrary, depending how reasonable she is willing to be, we may be the ones in a lot of trouble tomorrow. But for now the best thing you and I can do is rest and get ready." It was already well past midnight, and they both were emotionally exhausted. Heading to bed, Naruto and Tsunade did not snuggle together as was their custom. Both were too occupied by their own thoughts. The next day's team training transpired with unusual silence. Hinata was utterly silent and less spoken to, and Naruto seemed unusually glum, his usual antics and arguments missing from the routine. Anko noticed that something was amiss between the two, but let it slide, making a note to herself that she would have to have a talk with them later on. After the practice, after Anko had left, Naruto walked up to Hinata. Tsunade kind of wants to talk with us. I know, but I'd like to talk with you privately first, if that's all right. Just me? Naruto gulped as they began to walk towards the Hokage's tower, taking a route off the main road so they would have more privacy. He knew he wasn't the greatest conversationalist in the world, and was worried he might make things worse by opening his big mouth. So, you and Tsunade-sama, huh? Hinata slowly began. Yeah, but she's like your mother, isn't she? Naruto internally flashed back to his and Tsunade's many nighttime role-playing adventures and merely quipped, some nights more than others. What? Nothing, nothing, Naruto quickly said dismissively. Look, I know it seems really weird and out there but… Hinata interjected, saying what had taken her all morning to work up the nerve for. I know, you genuinely care for her. I have to admit though, I'm a little sad. I had always hoped that we would end up together. You know, Naruto, I know I'm not as strong or as beautiful or as confidant as Tsunade-sama. But the fact is that I have had feelings for you for quite the long time, as far back as the academy, and it really hurt when I found out that you had chosen Tsunade. Not just because I felt rejected, but also because you didn't even trust me enough to tell me. Naruto kicked a rock out of the path as the tower rapidly neared. He was more than a little guilty, now that he thought about how his romance with Tsunade affected his friend. I'm sorry Hinata, I know we're teammates, and maybe I should have trusted you as a friend to keep my secret, but I was just so afraid of what would happen to Tsunade if people found out. I don't really care what people think of me, but I don't think I could handle Tsunade-chan being hurt like that. After another awkward pause, Naruto continued. You know, until Tsunade told me, after you ran away yesterday, I honestly didn't know you thought about me that way. I guess I really can be dense sometimes. I still do, Naruto, even now. Hinata quipped, but before Naruto could inquire as to what she meant, they were at the front door of the main tower. It quickly became obvious that something was up, as the closer they got to the Hokage's office, the fewer people they saw. Even the regulars, like Izumo Kazuki or Katetsu Hogane were absent, along with the Anbu guard. The entire top floor was deserted. Obviously the Hokage had ordered them off, to ensure privacy for high-level meetings. Tsunade was sitting at her desk. Her countenance was calm and powerful. With a nod to both Naruto and Hinata, she gestured towards some chairs in front of her desk. Please, have a seat. After both teenagers sat down, Tsunade continued. Hinata Hyuga, it has come to my attention that you have become aware of certain events concerning Naruto and myself. I brought you here today to allow you to understand our situation, and ask for your discretion. Although apparently calm on the outside, Hinata was petrified with fear. After all, it wasn't every day that someone tried to intervene in the romantic affairs of the most powerful kunoichi in the world. Something about how Tsunade had said the words made it very clear that she was to keep her mouth shut and butt out of their business. I will not give up, Hinata's mantra repeated over and over inside her head, as she steadied herself for her next words. Tsunade-sama, as for your situation, I already realize that you and Naruto-kun are in love, but that doesn't change the fact that I am also in love with Naruto. Hinata tried her best to ignore the holes Tsunade's eyes were boring into her skull and continued. What I ask for is that in return for my discretion in this matter, I be allowed to date Naruto. Naruto was shocked. Hinata, Gomen, but I would never betray Tsunade like that. I'm not saying you have to cheat on her. She can even join in if she so desires. But I ask you to understand that my feelings are every bit as legitimate as Tsunade's and not to be discarded. Naruto was silent for a moment and then said, I'm sorry, Hinata-chan, but I love Tsunade, and she will have to learn how to share. Hinata interjected, her face filled with a determination Naruto had only once before. It was the same determination as when she fought Neji. Tsunade took a deep breath, coming to terms with what Hinata had just said. That's quite a lot that you're asking out of both of us, Hinata. Even if we were to agree to your request. Tsunade-chan. Tsunade raised her hand, silencing Naruto's outburst, and continued. While it is true we are hardly in a position to deny you any request at this point, you need to understand that what you are asking might be understood in some people as swinging? Yes, I've considered that, Tsunade-sama. And I've come to the conclusion that I don't care. I love Naruto with all my heart. And that I will do anything to be with him, even if that means sharing him with you. Turning to Naruto, Hinata's voice shifted to a quieter, less confidant tone. Although it might be nice, it actually really doesn't matter to me if you share your bed with me, Naruto. All I am asking is that I be important to you, even if not in the same way as Tsunade. She sighed and looked down at the ground, shame clearly covering her face, as her resolve of a moment ago had left, her own self-doubt returning. Naruto looked uncertainly at Tsunade, who nodded to him. Placing a finger under Hinata's chin, he lifted her head up, saying, "You are important to me, Hinata-chan. And although I can't say that you mean the same to me what Tsunade-chan does, I would be honored if you would remain by my side, as a teammate, a friend, and as a precious person who loves me. It's just that, someone as great as you should have someone who can devote themselves 100%, and I can't do that. You deserve better." Looking into his eyes she responded, "I don't want better, I want you." Upon hearing this, Tsunade sighed. There was no avoiding it now. Hinata would now part of their lives, both public and private. Clearing her throat to break them out of their saccharine moment, she then said, "Very well then, Hinata. It seems we've come to an agreement. I will share Naruto with you, but please understand that I love him with every ounce of my soul, and if you ever make an attempt to come between us, you will regret it." Severely. Hinata gulped and nodded her head vigorously. Tsunade then reached into a shelf of her desk and produced a bottle of sake and 3 cups, pouring for each person. Taking hers in her hand, she then said, "Well then, I propose a toast to new endeavors." All 3 drank their sake, Hinata coughing and spluttering, unused to drinking alcohol, earning her a smirk from Tsunade, who downed her cup without blinking. Hinata realized the bittersweet taste of the drink went well with her situation. She had what she had desired more than anything, finally. But there was a role in Naruto's life that was already fulfilled by Tsunade, that of his soulmate, and she had no right to interfere. Looking at the bottom of her cup, deeply in thought, Tsunade shook her head. She was still getting used to the idea of allowing Hinata to pursue a relationship with Naruto. But although she would never let it show through her stoic exterior, she loathed the idea of sharing the most important person in her life with anyone. Looking at the Hyuga girl, Tsunade commented slyly, "If you'll really be seeing Naruto daily after training from now on, I guess then we will need to make an excuse for you coming by my office so often. Naruto is still my protege, you know. Perhaps you would still like to try your hand at being a medical ninja?" Tsunade asked while pouring the Hyuga another drink. The Hokage's posture and intonation sounded almost challenging. To Hinata it was clear what Tsunade was really saying. "Are you sure you have the guts to go through with this?" Hinata, who 48 hours ago, was jumping at the bit to study under Tsunade, now chaffed at the idea of being a student of her rival. But practically, it was a good idea. Their secret was now also her secret, and by studying under Togodem as a medical ninja, in addition to her regular lessons under Anko, she would be in proximity to Naruto almost all day without raising anyone's suspicions. The young Hyuga looked uncertain for a moment, but her countenance hardened into a thin determined smile as she said, "I think that I would like that very much." She then downed her cup in one go, not batting an eyelash, even as the bitter drink burned a path down her throat. If Tsunade could do it, then so could she. Naruto, examining both women's actions, looked out the window and smirked at his own situation. The irony was certainly not lost upon the spiky-haired ninja. "Up until just a few short months ago I thought that no one would love me for myself. And now I think I have more love than I can handle." Although tensions were far from settled, the ordeal was over for now. Hinata was sworn to secrecy, and all was well with the world, or at least Naruto thought as much as he and Tsunade returned home. Naruto noticed that she looked unusually pensive. Guessing what the problem was, he took her hands in his. Naruto whispered in her ear, "This changes nothing, Tsunade. I still love you with all my heart, now and forever. I'm just comforting a friend who needs me, that's all." Tsunade sighed bitterly. Even though she had agreed to it, she really couldn't help but feel a little jealous. The fact was that even with the crystal embedded in her forehead keeping her body physically young as long as it kept releasing charka into her system, She was in reality old, far older than Naruto. Unlike Hinata, who seemed almost the perfect counterpart to Naruto, both in age and temperament. Everything has changed. She needs you far more than a normal friend does. I think you realize that. Yeah, maybe so, but… Naruto faltered, trying to come up with an argument. Failing, his eyes cast down to the ground, until inspiration flashed in his eyes. I think I have something to cheer you up. How about a back rub? Tsunade still grumbled a bit, but admitted that after such a stressful day, it sounded really good. After Tsunade sat down in their sofa, Naruto moved in behind Tsunade, and he gently began to rub her shoulders. Closing her eyes and enjoying the sensations, she didn't notice as Naruto removed his priceless necklace and placed it gently across Tsunade's neck. Tsunade, open your eyes. Naruto, why did you stop? Take a look. This is the same necklace I lost to you years ago. Why are you giving it back to me? I figure since I can't really afford a diamond, I could give you a piece of jewelry. After all, it's traditional, right? What's traditional? Tsunade replied, mystified. To give something expensive during a marriage proposal. Tsunade's breath caught in her throat. Naruto, what are you saying? Naruto walked in front of her and took her hands in his. Kneeling down, his clear sky-blue eyes looking directly into her soul, and Naruto said, well, Tsunade-chan? How about it? Once I become Hokage, will you marry me? Tears welled up in the brown eyes of the Godem. This was his own over-the-top way of saying that she was still most important to him, and her hands clasped him in a tight embrace, never wanting to let go. Yes, I will. I would like nothing better than to be Uzumaki Tsunade. Naruto gasped under the unrestrained hug. That's great, could you maybe let go now? I can't breathe. And so, 2 weeks later, marked fittingly by the thaw of winter and the awkward beginning of spring, Hinata's work as a medical ninja under Tsunade began, effectively filling Sakura's formal role, alongside her continuing training and missions with Anko. Naruto would also soon find his life far more complicated than before, as he endeavored to give his fiancée and his dearest friend both the attention they needed, both inside the bedroom and out, without making the other jealous. Far easier said than done, Naruto had to admit to himself. At her apartment across town, Anko Mitarashi fumed. Hinata and Naruto were both acting flaky in their training and missions, almost leading to the failure of an important B-rank mission, and she was going to get to the bottom of it. No way was she going to allow her team, with the prestige of being the elite squad, to become sloppy. She was determined to prove herself just as reliable and capable a Junin as Kurenai or Asuma or any of the others, and not just some unstable reject of Orochimaru's. Even thinking that name left a bitter taste in her mouth. Her whole career as a ninja had been tainted by his crimes and his defection. But in Naruto and Hinata she had a chance to prove that she had what it took to be a trusted Junin. And if that meant digging a little into her students' lives to get them to work out whatever their issues they were having, so be it. Spring had finally come to the village hidden in the leaves. As the snow melted away, the village began bustling with a renewed vitality. Looking across the village, there were many positive signs. Repairs were now complete. It was almost impossible to tell that there had been an invasion just 2 years ago. Two Chunin, Katetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki, walked through the village towards the training grounds, where their new assignments waited. Cutting through the marketplace, the hustle and bustle of the largest hidden village in the 5 ninja nations could be heard. Katetsu and Izumo were usually assigned whatever random task was needed at the moment. Right now they were given the important mission to train the next generation. Although noisy, if a skilled shinobi kept his ears open, he could hear some very interesting tidbits of gossip could be heard through the marketplace. Like 3 village elders sitting down to tea. Have you noticed? The Godem has completely stopped drinking. I guess that beast is good for something after all. Well, with that as her successor, the Godem can't really afford to let her guard down at all. Oh, you two are horrible. The Uzumaki child has become a part of an elite 2-man team. And since the other member is the heir to the Hyuga main branch, it means that the fox child is at least as strong as a Hyuga. That is impressive, I suppose. More like scary? Oh, shut up. If the Godem thinks the beast can be used positively, we should trust her. And besides, would you rather have that thing attacking us again, or in a role where it would have to protect us? True? Further on, they walked past some gossiping Hyuga branch members, both young girls. Hey, did you hear? Hinata-sama cut her hair short again. What? Why? She was looking so much more mature with her longer hair. I know, I even told her it made her look a little like the Hokage, and she actually got angry at me. It was kinda scary, cause normally she's as shy as a mouse. I guess she doesn't like being compared to the Hokage. Which is weird because I hear she being tutored of medical jutsu by her. Medical jutsu? Isn't that stuff hard? Yeah, but she's pretty good at it. Amazing. Taking a left turn into another thoroughfare, two merchants could be seen chatting by their booths. The Godem has ordered the refurbishing of the temple that was destroyed 14 years ago. You know the one dedicated to Inari. Yeah, wasn't it left derelict, its statues destroyed? It was a small shrine, with no resident priest to fix it up. Yeah, after the catastrophe and not many people were willing to help rebuild something that had to do with Fox Kami. But a month ago Hokage-sama insisted that it be refurbished and restored. I wonder why she would do something like that. Well, it is a kami of commerce and fertile harvests, so maybe she doing it to help with the trade. That must be it. The economy is still in a slump. How clever. Leave it to a woman Hokage to think of these things. A few blocks closer to the training grounds, there was a Korean barbecue restaurant, where Team 10 usually hung out between their now numerous missions. At one of the outside tables, once again Sarutobi Asuma was attempting to bribe Choji Akamichi and Shikamaru Nara into taking their training seriously. Team 10's morale wasn't exactly at an all-time high, since after the dissolving of both Teams 7 and 8, they were receiving almost a third of the rank C missions in the village, tedious transport and bodyguard missions that didn't pay particularly well, but was just dangerous enough to be, as Shikamaru eloquently put it, troublesome. Finally arriving at the training ground, their new students Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburame were waiting for them. Since Kurenai's team dissolved, both were often left out of missions, which were necessary for personal growth as shinobi. So by order of the Hokage, it has come down to them, since Junins in any capacity, teacher or otherwise, were still at a premium. Alright, you two. I am Katetsu and this is my partner Azumo. Now that your team is dissolved, the Hokage has assigned us to be your mentors. Now I understand the both of you are upset at the sudden breaking up of your group, but upon review of Kurenai's teaching record, both with your team and a previous student, Yakumo Kurama, and Hinata Hyuga's complaints, it was decided that it was in the general interest of Team 8 to break up. Teams are traditionally in groups of 3, because with less there is increased vulnerability to ambush and with more there is loss of stealth. But as a two-man team, there are still many opportunities as a shinobi. I am here to open your eyes to the wonderful opportunities of city missions. Not every shinobi in Konoha travels the continent, risking their lives, mind you. Kiba immediately interjected. What, you mean like those crappy D-ranked missions we had to do when we were fresh out of the academy? No, of course not. This is important courier missions for the village. You mean we'll be gophers? Shino said flatly. You'll be entrusted with helping Konoha and its various village systems run in tip-top shape. So, gophers. Shino repeated again. It's serious work, Izuno chimed in. At times you will even be asked to carry high-level documents from one location in Konohakure to another, rank-a-level work, with rank-a-level pay. As the two Chunin continued their speech, Kiba muttered under his breath to Shino. I still can't believe we are being trained as, what did you call it? Gophers, essentially miscellaneous errand boys. Shinto responded quietly. It's insulting, especially considering our skills already surpasses these guys, substantially. And meanwhile, Naruto has been taught by Jiraiya and now Tsunade. And I hear he is even part of an elite team. What's that mean? Supposedly, Hinata and Naruto's skills are being fostered at such an astounding rate as to no longer need a third member of their team. Is that so? Kiba cleared his throat to get the attention of the rambling Katetsu. So, since me and Shino are going to be working as a two-man pair, does this make us an elite team, too? Kiba asked, his voice hopeful. Every bit as elite as I and Azumo here. Katetsu said proudly, completely oblivious to the fact that the statement he just made was the opposite of what Kiba wanted to hear. Kiba sighed dejectedly. Yes, it was good, reliable work, with promising pay, but hardly a fast track to fame. Kiba looked up at the sky and asked silently, what does Naruto have that I don't have? Naruto slowly opened his eyes, sunlight creeping in through the window. For a briefest of moments confused as to why he had woken up so early, he sharply took in a breath as he became aware of the reason. Looking down at his lap, a familiar head of ponytailed platinum blonde hair bobbed up and down rapidly, as the Godem Hokage eagerly worked her skills upon her new fiancé. Naruto gazed lovingly at Tsunade, enjoying her ministrations. He personally preferred how she looked in the mornings, before she went to all the superfluous effort of putting on makeup. To him she was perfect just the way she was. Her lips, a beautiful pale shade of pink, being streaked almost comically around his member as she plied her technique, and her eyes, that intense color of chocolate brown, as she stared directly at him as she pleasured him, making him feel like a god. Naruto gave a sharp intake of breath as she began deep-throating him. Naruto had to admit that there was a certain sense of power, having the inspiration for Kunoichi everywhere, the most powerful woman in all the ninja countries, and thus quite possibly the world, submitting herself to him like this, and furthermore enjoying it. Naruto grunted slighted as he came, Tsunade eagerly swallowing every drop. Licking her lips, Tsunade got up and slipped back under the sheets next to her husband-to-be. "Good morning, Naruto-kun." "Morning, Tsunade-chan. That was quite the wake-up call. Don't you ever quit, we were at it just, 5 hours ago." "Well, yeah, but Hinata got the lion's share of you that time and, well." Said Hyuga was on the opposite side of Naruto, still fast asleep. Another of her study sessions at Tsunade's office had inevitably led to her having once again enjoying an evening with Naruto. "You just couldn't wait till this evening, huh?" Naruto inquired. "Well, let's just say that it's important for a shinobi to start the day with a high-protein breakfast." Naruto merely rolled his eyes at this. "What time is it anyway?" 5 o'clock. Anko wanted you at the training grounds in an hour and a half, right?" "Crap, that's right. She'll have out hides if we're late." "Hey, Hinata-chan, time to get up." Naruto turned over and lightly shaking the white-eyed girl awake. "Just give me a minute, I'm still sore." Hinata complained sleepily as she struggled to get out of bed. "I don't know how you do it, Tsunade. I barely managed to fit that huge thing in. Yet you can do it without any problem." "Well, Naruto and I have had lots and lots of practice," Tsunade said smugly. Hinata's eyes narrowed slightly. "Uh-huh. Anyway, I know you guys showered after last night's festivities, but I gotta go take a quick shower, I'm still sticky." As her nude form slipped off to the bathroom, she turned and said, "Oh, and Naruto, about last night, you were magnificent." Tsunade almost audibly growled as the bathroom door shut. The last 3 weeks had seen a large metamorphosis in Hinata, who was still shy and mousy in all things but matters concerning Naruto. Naruto and Tsunade began getting dressed. After a moment of silence, the sound of the water started, and Naruto spoke suddenly, the normal energy in his voice subdued. "You know, Tsunade-chan, I know that me being with Hinata is uncomfortable for you. If you're not okay sharing the same bed with her, just tell me. I'll explain to her that it isn't working out. Even if she exposes us, I think I would prefer that to cheating on you." Tsunade sighed, then promptly cuffed Naruto upside the head, who only remained unconcussed by the Sannin due to his recent training. "Don't be ridiculous, you aren't cheating on me. I'm right here, aren't I? Besides, I can tell that it stopped being pity between you and her for a while now. You do care for her, on some level. OWW, yeah, well, but I care about you, too. I want you to be my wife, you know, in case senility finally caught up to you." Tsunade huffed at this. "Very funny, Gaki, like I'd forget. Anyway, Hinata is the one who instigated this situation, not you. Besides, it's kind of nice having a competent secretary again." Tsunade joked lightly, trying to raise Naruto's spirits, but his eyes stayed downcast and he was frowning slightly. "It's just, I mean, it's not fair for you, you know? If I were in your shoes and I thought you were with someone else, I'd hunt him down and rip his heart out, seriously." Naruto deadpanned, not a quiver in his voice to suggest a joke. But nevertheless Tsunade bit back a laugh at the ridiculous image of Naruto in a suit of shining samurai armor, jealously defending her honor. "Don't worry your pretty little head, Naru-kun, I'm all yours, and I know that the largest part of you belongs to me." "And which largest part is that?" Naruto asked. "Your heart, Baka," Tsunade answered, though your comes in a close second, she mentally added. By now they were both completely dressed. Lightly rapping on the bathroom door, as not to break it, the Hokage called out. Hurry up in there, I need to put my face on. I still don't get why you insist upon wearing lipstick and nail polish every day. Naruto commented. You spend most of each day hidden behind a wall of papers, anyway. That may be, Naruto, but a woman needs to look her best, especially when she's the boss. Hinata Hinali stepped out, a towel wrapped around her slender, but slightly busty frame. Alright, I'm out. Looking at her training partner, who was already dressed and ready to go, she said. You go on ahead, Naruto, I'll catch up. Thanks a lot, leave me to deal with Mitarashi on my own. Oh well, I'll see you at training, Hinata-chan. Giving both Tsunade and Hinata a quick peck on the cheek, he dashed out the door, his usual energy restored by the beautiful spring morning. After an awkward pause, Hinata smirked and said, You know, Hyugas are renowned for their sight, but we tend to have pretty good hearing too. It was nice of you to reassure Naruto like that. I did it for his sake more than yours, Hinata. He tends to beat himself up whenever he thinks he's failed or wronged someone. Tsunade said, a hint of sadness in her voice. I know, that sense of empathy of his is one of his greatest qualities, and one of the reasons I came to care for him in the first place. Now fully dressed, Hinata went to the kitchen and grabbed 2 apples out of the refrigerator. Ah, speaking of Naruto, he forgot breakfast again. Can I grab you anything before I head out? No thanks, I already ate. Tsunade quipped, suppressing a smirk. Hinata raised an eyebrow at this, then shrugging, headed out after Naruto. Unlike Kakashi, Anko was always early to any drawing sessions or missions. It was odd, almost as if she had nothing better to do. By the time she would reach the training grounds, the odds were Anko would most likely have him doing some insane training drill, despite being early. Evening. With a great deal of effort, and more than a bit of desperation, Naruto Uzumaki had once again survived the increasingly ridiculous training of Anko Mitarashi, which had consisted of taxing physical drills and working out complex combat scenarios, all of which was followed in the evening by the strenuous tutoring and paperwork under Tsunade, who still demanded excellence in her students, and had finally endured a full evening of erotic antics, including being joined by the nubile Hyuga heiress, back at Tsunade's house. Naruto was out like a light, sandwiched between 2 equally tired women. 5 rounds with Tsunade and 3 rounds with Hinata, his stamina, mighty as it was spent. Hinata looked over at Tsunade, who lay on the opposite side of Naruto, both exhausted from who knows how many orgasms. As always, he finishes up with you. What a surprise. Hinata muttered. I swear, how many hundreds of times have you 2 done it, and he still prefers you in the sack, what's your secret? Tsunade shifted slightly as she gave Hinata's question some thought. I don't know, I just enjoy being close to him. I feel most complete when he's inside me. Maybe he feels the same. How wonderful for you too. Hinata sighed out sarcastically. Tsunade stared at the ceiling as she spoke. It isn't as perfect as you may think. A healthy relationship does not stand solely on. I mean, we're in a taboo relationship with a 40-year generation gap, and all of a sudden he wants to marry me, and I honestly don't know if I can be a good wife. If I'm really going to try my hand at marriage, I need your help to relate to Naruto. He needs to see me as more than a lover or boss, but as a friend. I want to share in Naruto's interests. But the music he listens to is just horrible noise, and whenever he shows me one of his electronic games, I always end up dying, and I can't even make miso ramen the way he likes it. What kind of wife can't cook? Now, I know you see me as some horrible rival standing between you and Naruto. The fact is, Hinata, that we need your help, if we are to make this work. Just consider it, would you? With that, Tsunade turned over, and draping an arm over Naruto as she closed her eyes and eventually nodded off. Watching the sleeping couple, Hinata smiled to herself. There was finally something that invincible Tsunade needed help with. It made sense, after all, since she was 53 years old, that she would have trouble relating to a teenager on some things. You both need me, huh? Alright. Why not? She thought to herself as she made herself comfortable. It felt nice to be needed, the white-eyed girl reflected, as she snuggled up against Naruto's dosing form. She barely missed a small ruffling of leaves outside the window, as she closed her eyes and drifted off. Anko was incensed. She had finally decided to follow after her students to try to figure out why they were always so distracted during practice. And lo and behold, here was the reason. They already knew they were studying under Tsunade in the evenings, which was no small cause of jealousy on Anko's part, but the real shock came when all three of them traveled to the Hokage's apartment. How long had she been blind to this while it went on behind her back? She had no idea how long the affair between Tsunade and Naruto had been going, but it must have been a while, and now it included the young Hyuga heiress. All the work that she had put into teaching the both of them, the emotional investment, and trying her best to be a respected and admired teacher, and Tsunade had swiped them both away. Did they really even need her? Once again, Anko was alone and she hated it. The pride she felt when Hinata mastered an attack jutsu, the sense of accomplishment when Naruto calmly and correctly assessed a combat situation. Those were no longer hers. Not to mention the rush of heat that went through her whenever she and Naruto flirted. All gone. She was alone. Again. Visions of snakes' eyes and cruel laughs echoed through her mind as she grappled with the memory of past abandonment. She wouldn't let it go back to the way it was before. She just couldn't survive being alone and angry at the world again. Anko's sour grimace slowly lifted up into a sadistic smile. She wouldn't have to be alone. She now knew of the affair and she held the futures of all three shinobi in her hand. In exchange for not exposing Naruto's precious Hokage and the heir to the Hyugas to scandal, she could blackmail him into doing anything she wanted. Anything, Tsunade muttered to herself as she trudged through the marketplace of Konohagakure. As was the way of the world, the brief winter had given way to spring, which in turn gave way to a long summer. Cicadas buzzed softly in the afternoon heat and the Hokage strode through her people. It was now approaching the festival season once again. A whole half of a year had passed since Hinata Hyuga had discovered about her and Naruto's illicit affair. Half a year of having to deal with Hinata Hyuga consistently horning in on her Naruto. She had given the day off to Naruto and Hinata, both of whom were probably up to who knows what perverted antics with each other by now. But it was just as well, Tsunade mused, for she needed to do this chore alone. Fireworks peddlers and yukata salesmen lined the streets of Konoha, selling their wares in preparation for the fairs. Tsunade, however, had little patience for the noise and bustle as she made her way as quickly as possible across town. Last year she had burned the Tanzaku paper she had written her Tanabata day's wish on before anyone else could have looked at it. She had felt bad about not hanging it on a bamboo branch as was customary, but she could not have afforded for anyone to see it. It was ironic, she considered, that her fondest wish last year was now the source of her rush. As she drew nearer and nearer to her destination, the more anxious she became. The worst thing about being the greatest physician of the era was that you knew a red flag symptom when you saw it. While allergies were in abundance in summer, she was going to see her former disciple Shizune for a slightly more important reason. "Congratulations, you're pregnant," Shizune said simply as she reviewed the test results she had in her hands. Are you sure?" Tsunade asked her former student. Tsunade was gobs naked, stuck in between a mix of utter bliss and complete shock. It seemed impossible. At 53 years old, it should have been impossible, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, Shizune asserted. "Your hormone test came back positive." Tsunade was euphoric in the back of her mind, but there were too many questions raised by this turn of events to simply ignore. "Shizune, I'm 53 for Kami's sake. How is this even possible?" "Well, this is just a theory, mind you, but I think because of the regenerative chakra you've run through your body for the last 25 years, you actually haven't gone through menopause. Once your body began to have your reproductive systems, which had up to that point received almost no chakra due to how your youth jutsu normally redistributed it, explaining your lack of cycle up until now, slowly began to start up again. Regardless, you would probably know better than me. After all, Tsunade-sama, you're the greatest physician of this century. And you are the one who designed your youth jutsu. All I know is that you're almost 1 month pregnant." Tsunade slumped in her chair, completely blown away. She had designed her youth jutsu decades ago as a means of prolonging her life. She had no idea that it had kept her fertile. It hadn't been designed for that purpose. After reaching 40, she had just assumed it was too late. But apparently it wasn't, and after taking into account the frequency of her and Naruto's lovemaking, it was actually surprising it hadn't happened until now. Shizune placed the papers in a file and handed it to Tsunade. "But why come to me, Tsunade-sama? Surely you of all people knew you were pregnant before you even came in here today." Tsunade sighed. I know, it's just that, I felt I needed a second opinion. I see. Well, next I guess I should ask if I'm going to keep it. Tsunade snapped angrily at Shizune's half-formed question. I see, and naturally, it's Naruto's, right? Of course. He has no idea yet. Shizune sat down next to her old sensei. You should know that at your age. I know. An increased risk of complications. But I'm having this child regardless. This may be my only chance to be a mother. And there was one other reason why I came to your clinic today. Oh? When the time comes, I'd like you to be there to help with the birth. There's no one I'd trust more with something so important. Shizune smiled warmly. Well, then. What can I say? Of course I'll be there. And there's no need to worry. You are Tsunade, the slug Sanin, certified medical genius. Although a 53-year-old woman giving birth is unheard of in the ninja nations, I'm sure you of all people could make it work. Getting up, Shizune jotted out a quick list. You probably already know this, but get plenty of folic acid, calcium, iron and vitamin D and absolutely, positively, no alcohol or tobacco. Understand? Shizune said, her voice taking a hard edge. You never listened to me about this when we were traveling together, but now that another life is on the line I have to insist. I know. Tsunade sighed. I've already quit drinking, thanks to Naruto, and I have no qualms about giving up tobacco. Folding the papers under her arm, Tsunade got up to leave. Thank you, Shizune, for everything. No problem, Tsunade-sama. You have my private phone number in case something comes up, and before you say anything, I know to keep this conversation to myself. Yes, until Naruto becomes Hokage in 3 months, we have to keep any risk of scandal to a minimum. I do wonder how you will keep that. Shizune pointed at Tsunade's stomach. Hidden for 3 more months. You'll be visibly pregnant by then. Naruto and I will think of something, we always do. Tsunade replied. Walking out of the clinic, she absent-mindedly put a hand on her stomach. I wonder how Naruto will react. Probably panic, at first. But I believe he can handle it. The truth was Naruto was well on his way to becoming Rokudane, in terms of power, skill, knowledge, and maturity. In fact, she was due to hand the title to him in 3 months' time. And someone who was fit to be a father of hundreds was fit to be father of one more. Upon returning to her office, she came to an unexpected scene. Hinata was neatening her paperwork. In recent months they had gotten used to each other's company. Tsunade's tutoring of Hinata ninja boosted her standing with Hiashi and the other Hyugas, to the point where she was now all but destined to lead the main branch in a few years. And Hinata helped Tsunade with her relationship with Naruto. From teaching her how to correctly hold a video game controller, to how to cook ramen just the way Naruto liked it. But even with their newfound friendship, it didn't stop them from trying to monopolize as much free time with Naruto as they could, which often led to them clashing with each other. It's your day off, you know. Tsunade commented nonchalantly. I know, but after a few hours of, well, you know, Naruto went out to train with Lee, and I figured I'd help you neaten your office up. Leaves less work for me tomorrow. I see, guess it was nice to have him all to yourself for once this morning. It sure was. Hinata said suggestively, swaying her hips slightly to emphasize. Tsunade stuck her tongue out childishly as Hinata turned her back to organize some scrolls. I wish I could remember what that was like, having him to myself. Tsunade commented sarcastically to herself. Hinata continued sorting. Oh, by the way, if I were you I would find a better hiding place for those. Hinata tilted her head in the direction of a drawer of Tsunade's desk. Or at least put a lock on the desk. I do a little cleaning, and look what I find. Tsunade audibly coughed as she spun around, a vein bulging visibly in her forehead. She normally wouldn't need to put a lock on it, since snooping around in her desk could be considered an act of espionage, but it seems she underestimated Hinata's newfound audacity. How? I've been your new student, working in and cleaning up your office for, what? 6 months now? You think I wouldn't notice them just because you bury them under old paperwork? That stuff really is shocking, you know, more older female teacher and student, and mother and son erotic stories than I could count. It's also cute how you cross out their names and put in yours and Naruto's. Who would have guessed that the great Godem had a Shota complex? And stashed away in your own office, no less. You really are a bit of a hypocrite for condemning Lord Jiraiya's vices yet having these. Hinata said smugly. You little? Tsunade was not in a happy place at the moment. It was taking all of her self-control to resist the urge to strangle the snooping Hyuga then and there. Already having her hormones out of whack was not helping, either. It may have been a positive change in her character, but the new bravado that Hinata was becoming used to displaying could be quite annoying. Suddenly, an idea dawned on Tsunade. Why get mad when you can get even? Her gritted teeth easing into a smile. How very thorough of you. Since cleaning and secretarial work is such child's play for you, I think I have another job for you. Sitting down in her chair, Tsunade continued. From now on, I think it might be best if you were to handle any of the Hyuga clan's business with me, at least for the next few months. It's troublesome always being bothered 4 or 5 times a day just because both branches seem to lack the common sense to run their weekly agendas by each other. Hinata's smirk dropped off her face. You want me to delegate the bureaucracy of a clan, numbering almost 300, every day? Everything from mission assignments to enrollment of new academy students. You'll be helping me out quite a bit, in fact. But it makes perfect sense. After all, you are going to be the main house's new leader someday, correct? Tsunade had hit a raw spot. Ever since Hinata had gained her newfound courage, she had made it clear that she was interested in reforming the Hyuga clan's family system alongside the soon-to-be Rokudame, Naruto. Tsunade had her dead to rights. I know you can do it. After all, you're so very thorough in your work. Tsunade finished with a grin. Tsunade mentally cheered as she congratulated herself on a job well done. That would give that white-eyed sneak something else to do than poking her nose in other people's private property, as well as give Tsunade for free time to spend with Naruto-kun, which was always a wanted bonus. It had a practical application as well. At Tsunade's level of chakra control, she could easily weave a henge to hide her pregnancy that only a Hyuga would be able to see through, and with Hinata's help such occurrences could be easily circumvented by simply making her the official liaison between her office and the Hyuga household. That's a point for me, little girl, she thought happily to herself. It was Hinata's turn to mumble angrily. But something far more important than the everyday petty bickering was about to reveal itself. As she picked up the last stack of papers, a piece of bright lavender paper fell out. Hinata bent down to pick it up. Huh, a note? It's differently colored than Tsunade's regular stationery. Looking over it, Hinata's pale eyes suddenly widened. Tsunade, what is it? You need to take a look at this. As Tsunade scoured over the note handed to her by Hinata, her heart leapt into her throat. The note read, I know all about the affair. I haven't told anyone, but if you want it to remain that way, cease tutoring Uzumaki Naruto and Hyuga Hinata. The note was dated for that very day. Suddenly the juvenile spat that Hinata and Tsunade were so involved in 30 seconds ago became completely trivial. Someone else knew about Tsunade, Naruto and Hyuga's particular arrangements, and they were blackmailing them to stay apart. But why? Tsunade thought as she pored over the note again for hints as to the perpetrator's identity. Why ask for just that? If you were going to attempt to blackmail the leader of one of the most powerful military forces in the world, why not make demands for money or forbidden scrolls or something? Hinata, I want you to get Naruto and bring him here, now. He needs to know about this. Hinata knew from the tone in Tsunade's voice that things had just become deadly serious. Jumping out the open side window of the office, she moved towards the training grounds as only a shinobi could. Within 10 minutes both Hinata and Naruto returned to the office, Hinata not even needing to give Rock Lee an excuse for grabbing Naruto, as Lee was preoccupied with doing 5,000 sit-ups alongside Maida Guy at the time of her arrival. Naruto himself was obviously winded, having gone from intensive training alongside Rock Lee, which is heavy exercise to say the least, to a full-blown sprint across town. Hinata caught me up to speed. Naruto panted, where's the note? Upon examining the note, Naruto noticed something that Hinata and Tsunade had missed. Something only a regular of the downtown snack shops would notice. A small smudge of dango sauce on the corner of the paper. Anko. It had to be. I think I know who wrote this. Naruto said quietly. Someone inside Konoha? Yeah, well, who is it? I'll have Ambu dispatched immediately. Naruto's eyes bugged out at the suggestion. No, he couldn't let his team's sensei be arrested or killed. Yeah, she was scary, but she wasn't evil. There had to be a reason why she was doing this. No, I think I should go alone and deal with this. Absolutely not, this needs to be handled quietly and efficiently. Naruto sighed, exasperated. Tsunade, for once please listen to me. I promise I can resolve this without anyone getting hurt, and I swear no one else will find out about us. Tsunade's eyebrows furrowed. Baka, I'm finally getting the council to warm up to the idea of you being Hokage, and you want to risk your life, just in order to let someone who could ruin us all alive? Tsunade's hand unconsciously went to her stomach. No way. I am not putting everything at risk just so you can play hero. It's not just your future at stake. During this argument, Hinata shrunk away, her shyness making a return. Her voice was muted, and as much as she tried, couldn't say anything. As much as she wanted Naruto to herself, the sight of Naruto and Tsunade arguing just seemed wrong. After a minute of stuttering, Hinata finally managed to squeak out. If Naruto really thinks so, I think we should trust his decision. Tsunade turned and looked at Hinata critically, then after a moment, sighed bitterly and slumped. Hinata was right. She had to begin to trust his decisions. He was no longer the bull-headed 12-year-old she had met 2.5 years ago. If he was ever to prove himself mature and capable of become a leader, now was the time. Tsunade turned to Naruto and said simply, "Who is it?" The fierce look in her brown eyes made it clear to Naruto that he was better of telling her. Naruto clenched his hands to stop from shaking. "I'll tell you if you promise to let me handle it." "Very well, I promise." "It's Mitarashi-sensei." "I see." Tsunade closed her eyes in contemplation, then began. "When this is over with, I need to talk to you about something very serious in private, Naruto." Tsunade got up and quietly slipped a kunai and a smoke bomb into Naruto's hip pouch. "But in the meantime, you have my permission as Hokage to do whatever you deem necessary to resolve this situation." At this point tears were forming the corners of her eyes. "But above all, you will come back safe. That is an order." Wrapping an arm around her waist with one arm and giving a thumbs up with the other, Naruto said, "I promise." After Naruto left, Hinata placed a hand on the emotionally shaken Tsunade's shoulder, and said, "When Naruto promises something, it means he's going to do it. Trust him." Once out of the Hokage tower, Naruto began to make his way towards Anko's apartment, not by jumping from roof to roof, but by calmly walking. While passing a trash can, he dropped the kunai in it. He wouldn't need it. Anko apparently knew about him, Tsunade and Hinata. And for some reason she wanted him and Hinata to not see Tsunade anymore. There was no way he was going to allow that to happen. He was not about to give up all the love and acceptance he had finally found. There just had to be a reason why Anko would do something so crazy. And he was going to find out what it was. Naruto had finally arrived at Anko's apartment. It was a sparse-looking one-bedroom apartment on the first floor, in a neighborhood on the other side of town from Tsunade's place, closer to where Naruto originally lived. It was a little run down on the outside, like the inhabitant rarely bothered with outside appearances. "Mitarashi-sensei?" Naruto called out as he knocked softly on the door. "Huh? Ah, you, come on in." The door's unlocked. Naruto heard from inside the house. Stepping cautiously inside, Naruto saw Anko sitting on her living room couch. She was slouched forward, her elbows resting on her knees, a half-full bottle of sake in her hand. But what really grabbed Naruto's attention were her eyes. Her eyes held a look so melancholy that Naruto felt a chill run through his very soul. Her eyes, at that moment, were just like his eyes from not so many years ago, before he had met Tsunade. Naruto slowly sat down next to Anko, his hands unconsciously fidgeting at the uncomfortable silence between them. Anko suddenly spoke. "Well, what are you waiting for? I didn't think they would send you to do it, but I guess a budding Hokage has to learn how to dispose of traitors, huh? Guess I get to teach you something after all." Talk about ironic. Dispose? Naruto's eyebrows furrowed. Everything suddenly clicked together. She was waiting for the Hokage to send someone to deal with her. Naruto shook his hands in front of him frantically. "Nani? Are you crazy? No, I'm not here to kill you, or anything that. I just wanted to talk. Talk? And what, pray tell, could there possibly be to talk about?" Anko nonchalantly took another swig from her bottle. "Why else would you be here? I'm the one who wrote the note, I admit it. It's all I could think to do." "Huh?" Naruto responded confused. Not stopping to acknowledge Naruto's confusion, she continued. "I waited for 3 months. 3 months. That's how long I knew, and couldn't think of a damn thing to do about it. I just waited and waited, and last night I just got so fed up I left that note." And before you even ask, no, I didn't really think I would get away with it, or that Tsunade would give in to my demands. Anko spat out. I mean, at first I did. I dreamt of all the ways I could make your lives a living hell with what I knew. But as time dragged on and I never actually had the nerve to do anything, I just... Anko sighed. Well anyway, with that note, I hope to get some resolution, one way or the other. Naruto was dumbfounded. He had always seen Anko as strong, forceful and even a little scary, and here she was, more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. And here I was such hot shit. She suddenly muttered angrily. Teaching a Hokage in training in the Hyuga air. But all along my job was only a cover, a distraction, so no one would suspect that you were Tsunade's pet screw. Not only were you getting to bang the most desired kunoichi to ever live, she was teaching you and Hinata things I or any other jonin could never even dream of doing. Setting the bottle on the floor, Anko let out a bitter sigh. No matter what I try to do, in the end, I'm just a pawn. And that's why I don't really give a shit if the Anbu come and arrest me, or worse. I'm superfluous. There's no reason why I should be here anymore. Naruto was completely stunned. She was, at that moment, just like he had been before he had met his precious people. Trying his best to put this whole insane situation into perspective, Naruto said. I didn't know you felt ignored, but come on, it's not worth blackmailing the freaking Hokage, right? I mean you're a Tokubetsu Junin, don't you have more important things to do than worry about me and Hinata all the time? No, I don't. Anko mumbled quietly. Naruto deflated with that revelation. Was that why Anko was always early to missions and training? She really didn't have anything better to do. He and Hinata were literally her world. He hadn't the slightest inkling before now, but now it seemed just so obvious. Naruto backpedaled a little, trying a different tactic. Listen, Anko-sensei. I know that we hid a lot from you, and I'm sorry about that, but Tsunade wasn't using you. It's just that, well, Tsunade and I fell in love. It's the real deal, and you know the council would have a fit of epic proportions if they found out. Kami knows it doesn't help that Hinata wanted to be with me despite that, or that I came to have feelings for her, too. The fact is, we were all afraid of being exposed. That's why Hinata and I kept this from you, despite you being our team leader. But you have to understand, even so, I've always seen you as my sensei. Don't you lie to me, damn you. You have Tsunade. Naruto turned to face his teacher, whom I now was becoming visibly distraught. Tsunade is the love of my life, and my Hokage, but not my sensei. The fact that she tutors me is just so I'll make a good Hokage when she retires, that's all. But even so, I never mattered. You and Hinata never once thought of me as significant to you. Anko spat out venomously, her face now inches from Naruto's. Even though he had shown up to Anko's apartment with the express mission of negotiation, Naruto was still Naruto, short temper and all. That's not true. You're important to me, damn it. Naruto yelled back, his patience worn thin by his belligerent teacher. Liar. Anko almost screamed at him. The air was almost crackling with anger and frustration, when Naruto suddenly did something very uncharacteristic. Leaning in, he pecked Anko on the lips. Why he did it could be anyone's guess. Maybe he wanted to show her that she did, in fact, matter to him, or maybe it was simply a way to defuse the powder keg situation he had found himself in. Or maybe he was just so upset that it was the only he could think of making Anko shut up. But whatever random firing synapse was behind that impulse, both were equally stunned and surprised. You kissed me?" was all that Anko said, almost a whisper. Immediately overwhelmed with guilt, Naruto quickly chalked out, "Sorry." But as Naruto tried to move away from Anko, her arms whipped out, wrapping around his neck, and she leaned in, delivering a far deeper kiss. And she then quickly gave him a shove, causing the already off-balance Naruto to fall back on the couch where he had been sitting a moment before. Before Naruto's brain could even compute what just happened, he found himself pinned, the purple-haired Jonin straddling his waist. In her eyes was no longer a look of melancholia, but rather of carnal hunger. What are you doing, Anko-sensei? You kissed me. No one's ever done that before," she said, her voice soft, yet holding an intense undercurrent. Her trench coat slipped from her shoulders and falling to the floor, leaving her only wearing a short miniskirt and a mesh bodysuit that left very little to the imagination. "I'll tell you what, foxy boy. I promise to stay quiet about you, Hinata and Tsunade, but in return, you're mine. As well, her sentence trailed off with a predatory smile. Naruto was visibly embarrassed. Listen, Anko, I can't do that. Naruto pleaded. What, am I not attractive to you? Anko asked with a mock-innocent voice, her breasts rubbing against Naruto's chest, only a thin layer of mesh covering them. Naruto almost whimpered. This was not how this meeting was supposed to turn out. No, you're very attractive, Anko-sensei. But I told you, Tsunade and I are a couple. He helplessly tried to explain. Anko looked thoughtful for a moment, sighed, and then shrugged her shoulders. Fair enough, so then we just won't screw, yet. Seeing the slightly unbelieving look in Naruto's eyes, she explained. People's perceptions aren't always correct, you know. I'm no fiend, despite what some people might rumor. Besides, there are plenty of other fun things we can do. The most important thing to me is that we do it together. But why me, and why now? Naruto asked, completely nonplussed. Because I don't want to be alone anymore, and because, well, because it was you who kissed me. She answered simply. There was an awkward moment of silence between the two, so for now, then, let's make out. She suddenly yelled happily. Anko sounded almost like a teenager with her first boyfriend. Naruto tried to object again, only to be interrupted as Anko's mouth clamped down on his. While it was true that Tsunade had given him permission to do anything to resolve the situation with Anko, he somehow doubted she had taken this scenario into account. Although he was physically enjoying Anko's attention, Naruto felt awful about this situation. The simple fact was that this was pretty much his fault. His kiss had set something off in Anko, who before was inundated with depression because she felt alone, and he had just inadvertently forged a powerful emotional bond. The fact was, he couldn't very well reject her and hold out hope for a happy resolution. Behind her libido and bluster, she was very emotionally fragile at the moment. Also, with the fact that she felt so alone, something Naruto understood from the bottom of his heart, the last thing Naruto wanted to do was hurt her. And finally, pinned as he was under the half-naked Jonin, Naruto was literally in no position to argue with her. As Anko sat up and slowly began removing her clothes, or what passed for clothes, anyway, and Naruto silently asked himself. Oh man, what have I gotten myself into now? He was exactly one discarded mesh bodysuit away from finding out. 1 hour of heavy petting later, Naruto laid back, staring up at the ceiling. Anko, wearing only her miniskirt at this point, spooned up against his side, an almost unnaturally contented look on her face. Not bad, kid. I didn't know it was possible to have so much fun without going all the way. If I had known that you were this skilled, I would have shown you some special training a while ago. I'm glad you're happy, Anko-chan. I, on the other hand, have no idea what I'm going to say to Tsunade. Naruto mumbled, still depressed at the idea of having cheated on his fiancée. Oh, Kami on a crutch, not this again. Look, just tell her the truth. I was lonely and you helped me out. It will help smooth things over for next time we do this. Yeah, I guess. Wait, what? Naruto's voice went from tired and dismissive to panic in half a second flat. Oh, this is just the beginning, stud. You're the crazy one if you think I'm about to pass up something this good. Anko said happily while giving the back of Naruto's neck a little nibble. She pouted a little as Naruto's concerned expression didn't lift. Oh, come on, am I really such a horrible bitch that it's impossible for you to believe I might actually care for you too? Naruto sighed. Of course not, it's just that things were crazy before, keeping both Hinata-chan and Tsunade-chan happy and giving them the attention they deserve. And now this in addition, it's all kind of spiraling out of control. Anko nuzzled against Naruto. Personally speaking, that's when things are often their most fun. Anko said with a manic grin. So don't worry about it. Everything will be fine. Oh, and Naruto, sweetie? Yes, Anko? If you ever leave me, I'll probably kill us both. She cooed happily as she cuddled against the blonde. Wonderful, Naruto thought sarcastically, one of his eyes giving a slight twitch. My codependent psychotic teacher has the hots for me. Just great. It had been 4 hours since Naruto had left for Anko's apartment. Tsunade carried out her duties as usual, handing out that afternoon's missions, but it didn't take a psychic to figure out she was unusually tense. Hinata tried her best to be strong for Naruto's sake, helping Tsunade where she could, but a large part of her was terrified at the prospect of Anko and Naruto possibly fighting. While she preferred the idea of her beloved winning, she didn't really want to lose the best teacher she ever had, either. Both their heads snapped up from their work as a loud commotion could be heard from down the hall. Hinata dashed out to see what it was, and seconds later came bounding back into the office, a wide grin on her face. Naruto's back, and he's alright. Hinata almost sang out, as a disheveled Naruto walked in with an equally disheveled Anko in tow. Tsunade did not miss how Anko seemed to be hovering close to Naruto. "Are we alone?" Naruto asked as he shut the door behind them. "Yes, I gave Kotetsu and Azuma the rest of the afternoon off to train Kiba and Shino." Tsunade answered. "It's safe to talk. Mission accomplished." Naruto replied. Anko promised that she won't say a word. There was surprisingly little bravado in his voice, which was strange considering that one of his most defining traits was his brashness and his pride. "I knew you could do it, Naruto-kun," the pale-eyed Hyuga said, overjoyed. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, looking over the blonde appraising ly. "I'm impressed, Naruto. You managed to defuse a difficult and complex situation without violence. How did you manage it?" Naruto's eyes furrowed. "It's complicated." Walking up behind Naruto, Anko chimed in. "No, it isn't. Just tell them how I was depressed, and you kissed me, and that I then tried to jump your bones," she said matter-of-factly, while draping her arms around Naruto's neck. "Thank you oh so much for that fine display of tact, Anko." Naruto muttered under his breath. "What?" Hinata said, utterly shocked. "That's impossible." Anko laughed. "Why is it whenever something unexpected happens to you Hyugas, this is impossible, or this can't be? Really, is your clan really so thick as to think that what you perceived to be the truth is always the absolute truth? I'll have you know Naruto and I were having quite a bit of fun earlier this afternoon." Tsunade was stone-faced. "What are you talking about, Mitarashi?" Her tone was such that even Naruto took half a step back. "It's no big deal, really. Naruto convinced me I shouldn't try to sabotage your relationship, so in return I decided to get a taste for myself. I have to say, Hokage-sama, you have excellent taste in men." Naruto flinched visibly, expecting some sort of hurled object, or horrible beating to be the cost of his indiscretion. But instead, Tsunade sat down calmly and sighed deeply. Naruto noticed for the first time just how tired she looked. Of course, that's how it always seems to go, doesn't it? Always the most ass-backwards, roundabout and complicated outcome as possible, she said to herself sardonically. Rubbing her temples, Tsunade continued to speak, her voice sounding strained. "Naruto, if it's all right with you, I would like to continue this discussion back at the apartment, just the two of us. As I said earlier, I have things I need to talk to you about." "But Tsunade-chan, I can explain." Naruto. Apartment. Now. Naruto gulped visibly as the Hokage put on her green jacket and began gathering her things for the day. The look that passed between Naruto and Hinata made it obvious to the Hyuga that Naruto would need the night alone with his fiancée tonight. "Don't worry, Naruto-kun. I can finish up here. You should probably get going." Kissing him lightly on the cheek, Hinata said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Naruto-kun." "Yeah, later stud," Anko said, giving him a kiss of the lips then ruffling his hair, an action which earned glares from both of the other women in the room. As Naruto and Tsunade left the building, Naruto noticed how Tsunade seemed to be acting very strangely. By all rights he should have been unconscious by now from the beating he should have caught from the normally confrontational Hokage. However, her subdued, almost tired demeanor in the face of today's events had Naruto both nervous and concerned. When they returned home, Tsunade sat down at the edge of their bed. Naruto shifted from side to side, nervous about what Tsunade had to say. "You really are incorrigible, aren't you?" Tsunade started. "Do you thrive on making my life harder than it needs to be?" Naruto sat down next to his betrothed. "Tsunade, if you had been there you would understand. Anko may act all manic, but the fact is she was very depressed when I encountered her. She was so very lonely, just like I was once." Tsunade could hear the sadness in Naruto's voice as he continued. "You saved me from that hellish loneliness, Tsunade-chan, but there was no one to help her. I just couldn't abandon my sensei. If I can help ease her loneliness, even a little, then I need to." Tsunade pouted, an unusual look on a face so normally empowered. "You were always like this, from the day I met you." You would always try to help people whenever someone needed you, regardless of the consequences. It's one of your greatest virtues, but it's not always fair to me. Tsunade then said. But if you would stand by Anko through this whole debacle, you would stand by me just the same, right? Naruto smiled softly. I would stand with you through anything, I promise, as both a ninja and a man. I want to marry you, Tsunade-chan, and never be apart from you. Then there's something important I need to tell you. What is it? Naruto's voice sounded extremely apprehensive. Sighing deeply, Tsunade simply said, I'm pregnant, Naruto. I just found out this morning. You're going to be a father in about 8 months. Nani? Naruto's voice came out almost a squeak. If there existed a scale with which to measure a person's surprise, Naruto's level would have had to be written in scientific notation. Of the literal hundreds of times we've slept together, we have never once attempted to have you pull out, nor have we used any form of protection. I suppose it's impossible to imagine this not eventually happening. Throw enough shuriken at a target and you'll eventually hit it. Tsunade explained. But I thought you were. So did I, but it appears we were both mistaken. Tomorrow I'm going to tell the council that I'm retiring in just 3 months. 2 whole years ahead of an already accelerated schedule. You'll only be 15 rather than 17. Even with Ebisu, Jiraiya and I advising you, it will be difficult. You are going to have to work harder than you ever have before in order to pull this off. But I have faith in you. If anyone can do this, it's you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto was almost visibly shaking with emotion. Nervous? Tsunade asked Naruto, her voice full of understanding. She was expecting him to react negatively at first. After all, he was just a teenager still. But then Naruto looked at her, his eyes filled with fierce determination. Just the opposite. I'm so happy I can barely hold it in. Don't you worry, Tsunade-chan. I'm going to be the greatest Hokage this world has ever seen. I'll help this village become the best ever. One worthy of our child. With this he kissed her deeply, and then held her in his arms. Although Naruto didn't see it, as his head rested on her shoulder, tears of joy silently ran down the slug Sanin's face. Later that night, while laying in bed, Naruto let all that happened sink in. He was going to be a father by the woman he loved. To have the strongest woman in the world, and a goddess by any sane man's estimation, chose to be with him, not just as man and wife, but father and mother. It was almost overwhelming. The idea that Tsunade was pregnant with his child was truly mind-blowing, and truth be told, also kind of why. So, Tsunade-chan, Naruto slowly began. Tsunade cut him off. Not tonight, Naruto, I'm tired, I have a headache, and the only reason you're not sleeping on the couch for causing that mess with Anko is the fact that I have a sneaking suspicion she might try to abduct you for another makeout session, where you and I asleep in different rooms. Good night. Of course, good night. The next day, the situation was explained in detail to all involved. In return for not exposing them, Anko had joined their group, making their party now one of 4. Although Tsunade had made it abundantly clear that Anko was still alive only due to Naruto's pleading on her behalf. Anko also made it equally clear she didn't give a crap what Tsunade thought. And so a very uneasy truce began, between a lonely woman who had finally found a sympathetic soul, a young girl who refuses to let her love be ignored, and a mature bride-to-be, who needed many apologies, gifts, and back rubs before she was willing to let her poor whiskered fiancé out of the proverbial doghouse. Later that week, Kakashi casually strode into the Hokage's office. You called me, Hokage-sama? Tsunade looked up from the paper she was currently writing in. Yes, Kakashi, you're right on time. For once, Naruto muttered nearby while filing scrolls. Tsunade continued, I called you concerning 3 months from now. As you know, this October I will be stepping down as Hokage, after advocating for Naruto to take my place. I would like for you to show support for Naruto. Kakashi merely shrugged. I heard. 2 years earlier than originally planned. That must have come as a great surprise to the council. That's one of the reasons I called you here today. We could use your help with securing Naruto's place as Hokage. I fail to see what I can do about these things. Naruto already has the backing of both Lord Jiraiya and yourself. What more could I do? Naruto spoke up. Kakashi, while it is true that I don't really need you as a teacher anymore, what with Anko and all, the fact remains that I do need a friend, and as many allies as I can get. Allies? Kakashi wondered aloud. Tsunade interrupted. Kakashi Hitaki, you were once a squad leader in the Anbu Black Ops. We could use your friendship, your allegiance and especially your connections now more than ever. I think you are in the best position to guard against any maneuvers of force by the council. Even though Naruto has given himself heart and soul to this village, some people within the council remain bigoted against him, even if not openly so. Although I have made the majority of them capitulate to my wishes, it remains impossible to tell if one of them might try to block Naruto's becoming Hokage, or even attempt to fund an assassination. Naruto commented, "A true ninja understands his enemies. It was one of the few things you taught me. And you are perfect for this job. After all, you yourself know of the dangers of unfair partiality better than almost anyone." Kakashi winced at the veiled reference to his past training of Team 7. "I see. Well, I'll see what I can do. If you'll excuse me, I still have a lot to do today." Standing up, he bowed twice. "Tsunade-sama, Naruto-sama." So saying he left the office in a puff of white smoke. Naruto smiled at Tsunade, who winked in return. They knew that although he didn't show it, Kakashi was almost sick with guilt over Sasuke's betrayal and the dissolving of Team 7. If there was something he could do to make it up to one of his students, he would. With this in mind, all that was left was to finalize the exact date for the transfer of title. And they both had the same one in mind. October 10th. Absolute insanity. Itachi Uchiha said in monotone. He and his partner Kisame Hoshigaki stood atop two ancient trees, overlooking Konoha from miles away. To think, not only is Naruto trained under Jiraiya to the point that they could be considered equals, but to train under both Tsunade and Orochimaru's first apprentice. Each event on its own would only be a stumbling block for us, but together, he is rapidly becoming too much for just two Akatsuki members to handle. So what can we do? Kisame grunted. Pain-sama wants him pretty bad. We should let our compatriots gather the other tailed beasts first and hope the momentum will allow us to capture what may be becoming the most powerful ninja in a century. So first the one tail. That was assigned to Deidara and Sasori, right? Right. Let them and the others complete their assignments, then when Naruto is the last piece on the board, we all strike at once. So then for now we do nothing? Kisame sounded displeased. It's not in a shark's nature to stand still. Waiting is not necessarily doing nothing, Kisame. In the meantime we must remain vigilant. When the situation and conditions are in our favor, we must be ready. After a particularly rowdy session of lovemaking, Naruto had laid himself down to sleep, but instead of his regular dreams, which mostly consisted of Tsunade dressed only in an apron feeding him all the ramen he could eat, the dream was pitch black. Nothingness, slowly fading, by degrees, into a very familiar yet sinister surroundings. It was the familiar sewers of his mental landscape. The sewer was, however, almost dried out, with only about a quarter of an inch of water on the floor, creating small ripples with each step Naruto took. Naruto thought this odd, as last time he was there, when he was training under Jiraiya almost 3 years ago, the water had come up to his calf. The tunnels seemed to stretch on forever, yet all led inexplicably to the same dead end. There was the cage, held shut by a single slip of paper, and inside, the leering face of the demon fox. Why am I here, Fox? My answer hasn't changed. I will never allow you to escape into the outside world, no matter how much power you could give me. I want nothing to do with you. Naruto announced angrily as he stood in front of the cage. A deep rumble permeated the sewer as the Kyuubi spoke. Let's get one thing straight right now, human. I hate you. I hate you more and more with each passing second of every minute of every day. I want nothing to do with you either. In fact, I would like nothing better than to take everything you hold dear and rip it apart in front of you, your women included. But the fact is that, even sealed away in this prison, there are rules to which I must follow. I have brought you here because of actions taken by your oldest bitch, the one named Tsunade. By her decree, a temple dedicated to my lord Inari has been repaired, one which I, in my haste to wipe your village from the earth 14 years ago, accidentally damaged. By attempting to gain Inari's favor, she has unknowingly righted an offense I had committed against my lord. I am thus now in her debt. Her debt? What do you mean? Lord Inari is the greatest of all foxes and kitsune, as well as a kami of grain and fertility. Your woman, the one named Tsunade, silently wished to become pregnant with your seed. And because of her unique physical makeup, she succeeded, although why any female would seek to bear the offspring of a fool like you escapes me. I know, she already told me. But how does her becoming pregnant concern you? Naruto asked, his chest tightening slightly. He did not like the idea of the evil fox being aware of, much less meddling with, his precious family. As Inari's child and servant, it is demanded of me that I intervene on her behalf. But sealed within your soul as I am, all I can do is this. By influence of my charka, I will ease the difficulties of her pregnancy, and she shall birth your brood without pain or complications. It will be seen as a miracle, given her age. How could you possibly do that in here? Naruto asked, thoroughly bewildered, both by the implications of what he was suggesting, and that he was even offering his help to begin with. Via the means by which you and her charka systems usually mingle with one another, fool. What do you mean? Dense as a brick, the fox muttered. Your constant copulations, you idiot. The fox sighed wearily, the gust of expelled hot air blowing back Naruto's hair. Honestly, you two put rabbits to shame. Like it's any of this is your business. Naruto retorted. Well, regardless, it has already begun. Her morning sickness should be reduced, as well as the aches in her body. You should be thankful. There are many men who would kill to have these blessings bestowed on their mates. Naruto tried to take in what he had just heard. It seemed just too unreal. Why would Go do this for us? How do I know you're not plotting something? I am many things, human, but I am not a liar. I told you already, I do this to settle a debt, nothing more. And besides, it is no skin off my snout if you gain a child. Just another thing for the ignorant, brutal world to inevitably sully and destroy. And the waters will rise again, as they always do. Wait, if you are a servant of Inari, a kami that aids and protects humans, and even prevents fires, why did you attack Konoha all those years ago? Kyuubi grinned wide with pride. I am a feral god of nature, boy, and although I obey the natural order of the universe, I will never subvert my will to you tiny apes and you idiotic society. Believe me, I would have done it the minute you humans began populating the forest, had I thought I could have gotten away with it. But by encroaching upon the forest with your tree cutting and overhunting, I had all the excuse I needed. With this the fox's expression took on a more thoughtful countenance. If only it hadn't been for that blasted Minato Namikaze, the one which you Konoha ninja referred to by the alias Arashi Kazama. To think a lowly foreigner who had somehow snuck into your hidden village would rise amongst its normally xenophobic ranks, and ultimately succeed in stopping me, it still seems unbelievable, even though my current habitat is proof of its occurrence. That day 14 years ago I had not considered that one of you humans might have the skill to seal me. Such a pity. There were so many humans I hadn't killed yet. You evil bastard. Naruto spat out, outraged at the fox's lack of remorse. The sewer shook with the fox's laughter. And know this, boy, I give this boon because I must, not because I wish to. Give me the slightest opening in my prison, or let the waters rise enough to flaw the seal, and I will find a way to take it all away from you, forever. The eyes of the fox looked on, the mad light of hate dancing in them. With that, the world spun again, and as Naruto blacked out he awoke in his bed. Tsunade, sleeping next to him on his left, had her arms wrapped around him protectively. Hinata snuggled against him as she rested on top of him, and Anko's lightly snoring form to his right. Placing a hand on Tsunade's stomach, 1,000 questions rushed through his head. Was the fox telling the truth? Would Tsunade indeed be able to deliver without complications? Could he be a good father? Was he still too young? He did not like the idea of having to trust that evil fox with something so life-altering. But for now, all he could do was go back to sleep, and deal with things if and when they came along. Stopping to consider his dream for a moment, Naruto realized that the waters in his soul were representative of his pain and despair. That is why the hallways were almost completely flooded when he had first been drawn in there as a child, long before he had met his first positive influence, Iruka, before he had even known what the Kyuubi was, believing it just another nightmare to mirror the nightmare of his waking life. Although now the water was almost gone, Naruto had to ask himself just how many times had those waters risen almost high enough to damage the seal in his youth. He wondered, and just how many times had his own pain almost destroyed him. Naruto's mouth formed a thin, grim smile. He whispered to himself, "That's just fine. You make all the threats you want, you giant red asshole. Thanks to the love of these women, I will never allow the sadness of my soul to ever inundate me again. You shall never escape, fox bastard." I will see to it, because soon I will have a new generation to protect. It was the morning Naruto Uzumaki had both been simultaneously dreading and longing for 2.5 years now. Looking outside the window of his and Tsunade's bedroom, Naruto watched as the sun began peeking over the trees of the great forest, marking the beginning of a new day. There was a buzzing of activity, unusual for this early, but it wasn't just any normal day. It was October 9th, the date held very special significance. It was the day before his 15th birthday, and it was to be the day Tsunade announced her retirement as Hokage, as well as nominating him for Rokudame. Butterflies fluttered in his stomach as he got dressed, straightening his robes, shifting uncomfortably in the formal wear. It was lucky that Hinata remembered to launder the ceremonial Hokage robes, since just the week before, he and Tsunade had enjoyed quite a bit of fun in her office while she was still wearing them, but with the office's blinds drawn, naturally. While Hinata was in the shower, refreshing herself for the busy day ahead, Tsunade busied herself with some final retirement paperwork at her desk. She was at the point where the hench she used to hide her pregnancy would not last much longer, and was beginning to have a little trouble getting around as a ninja. Wall climbing and roof jumping were rapidly becoming impossible for her already strained chakra resources, although she still walked from place to place without issue. Anko's snoring form could still be seen huddled beneath the sheets of the king-sized bed. Last night had been a celebratory affair, with all 3 women in attendance. Previously he had always rendezvoused with Anko separately from Tsunade and Hinata to avoid jealousy and conflict, not to mention possible violence, but she had willingly volunteered to join them that night. It was an odd arrangement, especially due to her open biuality. Anko had grown to show romantic interest in both her students, much to Hinata's chagrin, which made group activities interesting to say the least for the poor Hyuga. Looking at himself in the mirror, Naruto examined his reflection. He was still slightly shorter than Tsunade, which annoyed him. Anko, after learning of his evening routine of sedentary paperwork and ramen binges, had instigated a regimen of fierce aerobic exercise, above and beyond that of his normal training, as well as accompanying him to every meal, ensuring he ate several servings of leafy vegetables and lean protein. He personally hated the idea of eating greens, but it was necessary to keep from being stunted his whole life. Tsunade of course preferred her lover shorter, as it fit her fantasies, but Naruto personally wished to be equal in stature to the Hokages who preceded him. Thankfully he still had a few more years of adolescence ahead of him to grow. But he was hours away from achieving his ultimate goal, decades faster than any of his reasonable estimations. Truthfully, in the back of his head, he had only half believed he could become Hokage, and that it would take decades of sacrifice to convince the village he was worthy. Now, a day short of 15, he was moving to become the head of the greatest military force of the ninja continent. His situation still seemed unreal to him. How in 2.5 years he went from a beaten and scared pariah to the lover of the most powerful woman in the world and toast of his entire village. He was shaken from his reverie as Tsunade's arms looped around his waist from behind. Her paperwork was obviously finished. "I love you, Tsunade," he said simply as he leaned his head back against her generous bosom, looking at their reflection in the mirror. "I love you too, Naruto. You know, I was honestly surprised you didn't use any kage bushins last night. It would be a lot easier than trying to please 3 women at once." Naruto closed his eyes and thought. "I dunno, I guess I don't like the idea of using something fake, something created to deceive people to be intimate with you. It would be like saying that it didn't really matter to me, but it does. They aren't me, not really, just consider it a hang-up of mine," he said smirking. "Let's just say I'll use kage bushins the day you finally let me screw you without your youth henge up." Never. Tsunade stuttered, completely flustered and embarrassed at the idea. She saw his point, though. Everyone had their hang-ups, for her it was her appearance, for him it was needing to be close and important to his precious people. After Naruto left the room to go get breakfast, Tsunade took a look at the snoring lump still in bed. "Oh, wake up already, you lazy skank," Tsunade said, tossing a pillow at the dozing Jonin's head. Anko yawned. "What's your problem, Bon?" Anko had taken up Naruto's old nickname for Tsunade to annoy her. "Well, Viper-chan," Tsunade responded irritably. "Seeing as it is Naruto's big day, you'd think you could at least get out of bed for it. He's been Hokage for the last 2 months. Ever since you began getting a little paunch from your pregnancy, he has been falling over himself to do all your paperwork. You may be making the announcement today, but I think you've been retired for a while now. Well, Naruto still wants you to be there at the meeting for some reason that eludes me. 'Cause he's smart enough to have a Jonin bodyguard around when you're dropping some big news on some very powerful people. With my reputation, no one would dare make a move at my Naru-kun. Tsunade glared at the younger woman for a half a minute, before sighing and saying, "Whatever, you clingy weirdo. I don't have the energy to argue with you, just be ready to go by 10, as the meeting is at noon." Hinata walked in, fully toweled off, and began to get dressed. She was slowly getting used to the other two women's presence, although Anko's lecherous gaze did make her squirm a little. Hinata's body, especially her bust, was becoming a rival for the other two women, but her hair was still as short as it had been when she was 12, to differentiate herself from her rival, Tsunade, keeping that way especially after Naruto admitted to her that he couldn't envision her with long hair. She also still insisted on wearing heavy jackets, rather than showing of her body like most kunoichi. She had simply explained to Tsunade that she didn't see the point in flaunting what really only belonged to Naruto. Around 10:30 all four shinobi left for the Hokage mansion, and the head office where the noon conference would be held. There were still preparations to be made. Politics was a battlefield, and the battle to be waged today would be a fierce one. At noon, Konoha's council members slowly began to filter into the mansion. The leaders of every major clan and guild within Konohagakure, from Hiyashi Hyuga and Asuma Sarutobi, the political heavy hitters, to the Akamichi and Nara clans, responsible for the ingredients of many of the village's most potent medicines and food pills. Leading them all were the eldest members, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Utatane, the third Hokage's old teammates. Tsunade took her seat, Naruto sitting to her right, Hinata to her left. Anko was standing slightly behind Naruto, in bodyguard position. Kakashi Hitaki was nowhere to be seen, which was actually a good sign, as the most effective protection is often that which isn't seen. Tsunade cleared her throat. "I'm sure you know why I called you here today. As you know, I have decided to step down as Hokage." A rumble passes through the assembly. "And I am here today to formally request that my student and close confidant, Naruto Uzumaki, be considered for Rokudame of the village hidden amongst the leaves. He has shown himself to possess the will of fire, the spirit of honor and loyalty that this village has sought to instill in its ninja, and is in the greatest immediate position to succeed me, even when considering other, more mature candidates." Dead silence filled the room. Homura shook his head and after a moment of silence said, "We knew you were planning this, since you announced your plan to retire, but I still can't believe you are actually attempting it. You must realize that there are too many obvious issues for us to possibly consider this course of action." "Such as?" Tsunade said casually. Considering his age, not even the Sandaime became Hokage at such an early age. He isn't even a Chunin yet. Sand chose its Godem when he was only 12, and you're telling me that a 15-year-old is somehow worse. But that case is vastly different. We all saw the Chunin exam preliminaries. Subaku no Gaara is, what, powerful? A genius? Need I remind you that Naruto defeated him in personal combat? Allegedly. The only witnesses we have of those events are the words of a frog, a summoned dog and a ninja who is now a missing nin. This bickering is getting us nowhere. His inexperience is the least of our problems, in fact, Tsunade-sama, well." Homura hesitated. "Well, what? First we respectfully request permission to speak frankly, regarding Naruto and his seal." Kaharu interjected. Tsunade sighed. "Since Naruto is central to this discussion, I will waive any punishment for breaking the third's dictate." "Thank you. Now, you must realize that many villagers still see Naruto as an artifact of a horrible national tragedy. You know as well as I do that their prejudice is unfounded. Even so, you can't expect the scars of the devastation that occurred to fade after just 15 short years. People are naturally biased against him. But they shouldn't be." Tsunade snapped, thoroughly exasperated. "Naruto is the legitimate son of Minato Namikage, who became Hokage through sheer ability, and after all Naruto has sacrificed for us, they should be on their knees thanking him. He has proved himself time after time since his becoming a genin." There were murmurs of agreement throughout the room. Tsunade continued, between his helping around the village, To his growing presence in the Hokage's office, he had endeared themselves to many of the ninjas and their families. And furthermore, his tutoring under me, Jiraiya, and Anko Mitarashi marks him as an heir to the best of this village's techniques, and not once since his return has he had to rely on the fox's charka. The villagers will see his worth once he is Hokage, and those that won't are not worth concerning ourselves with. Koharu spoke up. Even if he could rally the approval of the villagers, consider the place you are putting us in, with the accelerated timeline of yours. It is only natural that it feels unnatural for us old oaks to see this sapling shoot up so fast. I apologize for that. There is a good reason why I have had to speed my retirement, I assure you. Tsunade stated calmly. Hiyashi Hyuga shifted in his seat uncomfortably. With your permission, Tsunade-sama, there is certain disturbing quality to your and Naruto's relationship which also bears discussing here today. Tsunade cursed under her breath. Of course, Hiyashi's Byakugan was on almost 24/7. The henge to hide her pregnancy she was using must be no more deceiving than a wide-open window. A major miscalculation, but there was no going back. How so, Hiyashi-san? Her grip on her chair tightening visibly. I realize that you and he have been living together for some time, but given what is apparent to me today, I have to ask whether or not what you are asking today is in the village's best interest, or your own. I do not wish to cause scandal. As a Hyuga, I am above such things, but it is clear you have been fraternizing with the boy in extremely inappropriate manner, and that it raises the question of if you have the village's interests in mind with this proposal. As is obvious that you have become lovers, and I can see quite plainly that you are pregnant. The room was instantly in an uproar. Anko moved in front of Naruto in case of any attacks. Although none rushed them physically, condemnations, insults, validations, praise and questions were being directed at Tsunade and Naruto all at once. Naruto stared steely-eyed at the detractors, trying to memorize the faces of those who would criticize his relationship with Tsunade. Hinata looked like she was about to curl up and die from embarrassment. Silence. Tsunade shrieked as her fist slammed on the desk, causing a long crack to run across the thick redwood desk. A hush fell over the room. Tsunade took a deep breath, summoning every once of her oratory skills. Hiyashi-san's perceptiveness serves him well. I was going to announce this later tonight, but it seems the time has come. You ask me and I will tell you. Yes, I am in love with this young man, and I carry his seed, despite all odds. Then you admit to fraternizing with one of your students, and that your motives here today are suspect. Hiyashi exclaimed. Tsunade raised her hand, instantly silencing him. But that does not render meaningless the time he has spent diligently as my student. I can assure you, there was no favoritism there. Admonish me, even condemn me if you wish, but I maintain that the legitimacy of Naruto's claim as Hokage is not diminished. You can't still be serious, this changes everything. This is an act of gross misconduct. Koharu exclaimed. If you will all remember, cages across all the 5 nations have had lovers and concubines. Our only exceptions in this village are the Sandaime, who was married to his wife for over 45 years, and remained steadfastly loyal to her until the day he died, and the Yondaime, who died young. Merely because I am a woman you expect me to be chaste? I am entitled to share my affections with anyone I choose. And I chose my beloved student. After all, you all know that I became Godem at Naruto's request, not Jiraiya's. You realize there will be serious ramifications, Tsunade. Homura warned. Perhaps, but in ways you might not be considering. Have you stopped to think about the family trees involved in this affair? The heritage of my family, my grandfather and granduncle, as well as that of the Yodem, have sustained this village. And now they come together, and should my child be a boy? Mokuton, the wood element jutsus, Hiyashi said, dumbfounded, would be revived in our village. Tsunade nodded and continued, I am retiring, regardless of your answer to me here today, and I know for a fact that there is no one else capable and willing to assume the role of Hokage. Without Naruto here to safeguard you, Konoha would be swarmed by invasions within the year, I promise you. Regardless of whether you accept Naruto and me, I still insist you allowing him to become Rukdame. Given both what is, and what will be, it is clear where the village's fate lies. A deep grumbling permeated the room. Some faces were bright red with frustration at what was transpiring, but others were merely thoughtful, curious about the history-altering events that were transpiring. Hiyashi was especially thoughtful. If what he was seeing in her was accurate, then the village was due a shifting in paradigms. Naruto's child, carrying the blood of 4 different Hokages, 5 if Naruto actually was chosen, would be a thoroughbred ninja in every sense. Such a wild turn of events had not been anticipated by any of them. But just when Elder Homura was about to speak, a new voice rang out through the room. With all humility, Godem, I object to this farce, and refuse to have it go on any longer. A solemn voice rang out. The council turned to look at the man who spoke. An old man, with bandages covering part of his head and the remains of a damaged arm. Of course, Danzo had to be here. Tsunade thought ruefully. The hawk of the village elders, the bellicose Danzo, whom fought with the Sandaime over the leadership of Konoha decades ago. It is pedophilia, no, bestiality, consorting with the Jinchuriki. If you really needed such a creature to entertain yourself, you could have simply asked the Inuzuka to provide one of their dogs for your amusement. How dare you? Tsunade said, her fist clenching. Naruto gritted his teeth, wishing he had snuck a kunai in with him under his robe, so he could show that one-armed bastard what it meant to insult Tsunade. Perhaps after all, it is for the best you stand down as Hokage. Having a gambling drunk and now apparently a whore in charge of our village is hardly ideal for our image. You're on very thin ice, Danzo, get to your point. Tsunade hissed through her teeth. I simply ask that we be practical in the face of these outrageous events. Even if Naruto has all the training and ability in the village, the fact remains that he is not battle-hardened. And this miracle child of yours is not even born, and cannot factor in our current dilemmas, which are now. War is an inevitability in this village. A fact your predecessor refused to acknowledge, a fact which cost him his life. In fact, because of the Shodem's coddling philosophies, no Hokage has lived to a natural death until now. All of them died protecting this village. Our next Hokage should be one with the experience necessary to lead this village, and the will to do so in a time of war. An untested youth, who failed to even pass the Chunin exam, is unworthy. Are you suggesting that you should be Rokudame, old man? You look about ready to fall over. It is true that I am old and feeble in body, but I have the experience needed to lead this village. I offer you this compromise. One of my acolytes would fight Naruto. Should he lose, my leadership will be chosen. Should he prove victorious, I will assent to his leadership, at least for now. A pale young man stepped out of the shadows. Closed eyes and an irritating grin plastered all over his face. He had short black hair, a short tanto blade over his shoulder. I'll fight him, Naruto said simply. Naruto, this is ridiculous, you don't have to. Tsunade began. These bastards have talked bad about you for far too long, Tsunade-chan. A Hokage fights for what he believes in, and to defend his values. He is the immovable pillar of the village. I won't let this guy get away with talking bad about you. Then let us adjourn to the mansion roof, where there is a sparing area. Danzo replied. The day was clear and a cool breeze flowed through the village. It must have been an odd sight, a group of village elders' congregation to the roof of the Hokage mansion. But they were there to watch a battle that would decide whether or not Naruto would become Hokage. Naruto had dressed himself back into his orange and black jumpsuit, a filled kunai pouch on his leg. Both fighters knew the rules. They were to fight until one gave up, was knocked out, or killed. But unlike the exams, there were no referees here to call it off. This was a fight they had to settle for themselves. Before they began, they circled each other. Don't you have a name? Naruto asked. Actually, I don't, the young ninja said cheerily. This nameless, pale fellow was really getting on Naruto's nerves. Please come at me with all you have, I'm not worried. The way you let Tsunade defend you like that, I doubt you even have a. The figure said, the same happy tone in his voice. Keep talking shit, you grinning bastard. Naruto growled. They clashes several times, the stranger using a paintbrush and scrolls to summon painted images to come out of the paper and attack. His technique was very unusual, and very potent. But they only managed to strike Kage Bushins. After several minutes, the nameless ninja finally cornered who he thought was the real Naruto. I've got you. His short blade sinking into Naruto, only to have the blade blur as it went through him without cutting. Regular Bushin? Not really, Naruto said, rearing back and decking him in the jaw hard. How? The ninja said as he got up from the ground. The main flaw of Bushins is they can't physically interact with their opponents. Kage Bushins can interact, but their fragile Charka networks are shattered by a single blow. Using Tsunade's teachings on anatomy, I've created an adaptive charka network for my cage bushins. You can't hit them, but they can hit you. I like to mix them in with my regular ones. They both leapt back and began circling each other, the nameless ninja looking for the real Naruto in the group of clones. No matter how adaptive you've made them, their network will collapse if rended into several pieces. A mass of smoke rose up as painted lions tore the bushins to pieces, as they dissipated, leaving only Naruto, scraped and bruised. I've already won, you know. Naruto said evenly. Really? The nameless root operative asked, the unnerving grin never leaving his face. Yeah, look for yourself. For just a split second he glanced down, to check himself for exploding tags or booby traps. There was nothing. What are you talking about? Looking back up at his opponent who hadn't moved. Look again. It was then that the root operative realized he had been stabbed very instant his eyes had left his target. Cage Bushin, you were also a... He whispered. Word of advice, asshole. Naruto leaned forward and whispered to the fallen shinobi. It's always a Cage Bushin. And with that the Cage Bushin of Naruto exploded in a hail of kunai, several piercing the young nameless ninja's arms and chest. The group stood stunned. Naruto, a genin, had defeated one of Danzo's root division, notoriously emotionless assassins. It was only after the dust had settled that they had found out that he hadn't been killed, only knocked out from blood loss. Naruto stepped forward, his real position as being hid amongst the council men as an unassuming council member, still in his robes, turned and looked at the delegation of gawking village council members. Do you think I wasn't prepared for this? Naruto spat. I've spent the last 2.5 years of my life preparing for this day. I have been trained by the Toad Sage, the gallant Jiraiya, the medicine mistress Tsunade and the Orochimaru's only true heir in Konoha, Anko Mitarashi. I'm more than happy to kick the shit out of anyone who challenges my authority or threatens my family's honor. But I assure you with the fact that by becoming Hokage you will all be as my family. Danzo replied calmly and evenly, not even a hint of outrage in his voice. No further objections, Tsunade-sama. It seems your boy toy has enough teeth to last as Hokage, at least for a while. Tsunade beamed with joy, as every elder looked utterly cowed. Well, is there any other objections to my nomination of Naruto? She asked. Only the wind was heard among the dead silence on that rooftop. Good, then with the council's permission, I hereby pass my title as Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves to Naruto Uzumaki. I've already gone ahead and filled out the necessary paperwork, in triplicate. So saying she took her hat, which had once adorned the Sandame's head, and placed it on Naruto. Naruto grinned. Then my first act as Hokage is to announce a celebration. As you know, tomorrow is my 15th birthday. It will be held at Tsunade's home, and there will be another important announcement at the party, one fitting the celebratory nature of the gathering, namely my and Tsunade's marriage announcement. But should any of you prefer to attend the annual effigy burning of the Kyuubi, well, that is your choice. However, naturally, all council members are encouraged to attend. Almost every council member gulped simultaneously. As far as the village elders were concerned, the annual effigy would rapidly lose its popularity. None of them were about to be caught dead at an event which now went hand in hand with the ostracizing of one who was now their Rokudame. The event swept the village like the fiercest of summer wildfires. You could almost hear the clamors in the air as everyone talked. Ino Yamanaka was the first to learn from her father and was, of course, flabbergasted. No way, she said. There is no way that Tsunade-sama and, I just can't believe this. How long was this going on? She yelled out, almost coming out as a shriek. How troublesome. Shikamaru Nara grunted. You realize, they probably tried to keep it from you the most. Everyone knows how you gossip. Shut up, Shikamaru, it's not like you had any idea. She said defensively. Of course I knew. I knew 2 years ago. But you think I'm going to touch that troublesome mess with a 10-foot pole? You're dead wrong. Choji merely popped another chip in his mouth, his mind turning to the possibility of impending wedding cake. Of all the tumultuation, one voice above them all in sheer outrage. Baka, Sakura shouted. She had learned from her fellow nursemaid at the hospital where she still worked. He can't be Hokage, he's a moron at best. She yelled at the top of her lungs, drawing many states. I'll never accept that bastard, never. I lost Sasuke because of him. All her outburst earned her were dirty looks for the passing villagers. She was badmouthing a Hokage now. Rock Lee, passing by, came over to her, a small frown on his face after hearing Sakura's yelling. "Sakura-san, I was going to take this happy occasion to ask you to join me for the festivities in Lady Tsunade's place tonight, since everyone who is anyone is going to be there, but I can see that you would rather be alone right now." As Rock Lee turned to leave, Sakura yelled, "Wait. Why are you going?" Lee responded, a hint of sadness in his voice. "Forgive me, Sakura-san. But perhaps you can contact me, only after you have taken some time to grow up." Sakura stood there shell-shocked. She had just been rejected by fuzzy eyebrows. 1010 was almost rendered comatose with shock. "My personal hero is the lover to the village idiot, who's now Hokage," was all she could mutter. Guy stood tall, manly tears streaming down his face as soon as he learned. Naruto. Marriage is the joining of love and passion, a product of hard work and devotion, surely the epitome of youth. That you could not only achieve your dream but bring youth to the heart of Our Lady Hokage? You are truly great," he said, giving a thumbs up towards the Hokage building. "I can't wait to see your youthful face on the Hokage monument, a testimony to Konoha's power of youth." Neji met up with Hinata, who was a short distance from the fracas. "And I can see that Tsunade is not the only one that Naruto has been spending time with." Hinata gasped and quickly checked herself with her Byakugan. Sure enough, a small semen stain was on the edge of her jacket. Thankfully her father must have been too distracted by the proceedings at the Hokage mansion to have noticed. Neji merely shrugged his shoulders. Naruto swore to change the Hyuga. "I believe he can. And I believe that thanks to you, he will sooner or later have practical reason to. Not even Uncle Hiyashi-sama would dare attempt to have seals placed of a child of a Hokage," he said, looking straight at Hinata. She blushed crimson red, tapping her fingers together, lost in her own world at the idea of her and Naruto sharing a child. Neji simply sighed and continued on his way towards the training ground where his team was gathered. 1010 would probably need all the support he could muster right about now. Jiraiya stood at the side of the gathering, a bemused expression on his face. Of course, he had known all along, but now that it was out in the open, he felt ambivalent about what had occurred. On the one hand, his masculinity was more than a little slighted, with his teenage student betting the woman he had pined for over decades. But on the other hand, he was genuinely happy for his old teammate and his student. He knew how hard it had been for her to lose Nawaki and Dan, and was happy she had found someone in her life, even if at this late point. And, he finally decided, with a perverted chuckle, that it needn't be a total loss. Tucking his telescope away, he silently pocketed the manuscript to Icha Icha Trinity, a first among a series of books concerning a mature, unwed queen who is rescued from her isolation by a young rouge, along with the help of a shy young seer and a lusty, vicious she-pirate. Several days later, Sabaku no Gaara, current case-cage of the village hidden in the sand, stared at the neat and completed and collated paperwork in front of him. Although it was satisfying to him to get all his work done as early in the morning as possible, it left him with a slow afternoon. As the new case-cage, he had immense political power to match his ninjutsu prowess, and he was generally given respect wherever he went. But even 2.5 years after the Chunin exam in Konoha, he was still socially awkward. True, he was no longer violent, thanks to the intervention of Naruto Uzumaki, but it was hard to make friends when almost everyone had memories of avoiding you at one point or another. He trusted Uzumaki implicitly. He of all people knew what it meant to be completely and utterly alone, the pain of being a demon container. Flipping through a missive he had received a few minutes before, Gaara spoke to his sister, who's sitting across the room, relaxing after having completed a mission. "Tamari, you enjoyed your time in the Leaf, didn't you?" he asked. "Yeah, it was kind of nice," she answered. Truth be told, she didn't like that they sent the young man who made a fool of her during the Chunin exams as her guide, but it was a picturesque place, a far greener than any village she had seen before. "Why do you ask? I'm considering having you join me on a goodwill mission there." He turned and looked out the window. 2.5 years ago, we surrendered without terms, shamed as duplicitous backstabbers to the rest of the great nations. And so are now almost as a protectorate, no longer our own sovereign village. As I understand it, Naruto Uzumaki has officially been selected to become Rokudame. In addition, I've received a secret communique from Naruto himself, sent by one of his toad summons, a small angry one called Gamakichi. It seems he is planning to be wed soon, although his wife was not mentioned by name. I would like it very much if you could go to Konoha with me, pending the possibility of renewed political interaction. Will it really be that helpful? Temari asked quizzically. It didn't seem to her that one more party-goers at a Hokage's wedding would make that much of an impression. Gaara nodded. We are witnessing a major shift in the political landscape. It would be in our best interest to be there, and wish them both well. The reason I ask you and not someone else is because I noticed how happy you were when you were sent for diplomatic missions. The wind of the forest seems to please you. I guess we will be attending a wedding then. When is it going to be held? Exactly 1 month from now. November 10th. Only 1 month to prepare for something like that. Temari gasped. It seems rushed, doesn't it? Gaara calmly nodded in affirmation. Do you have any idea why? Temari asked curiously. The sun rose once again over the village of Konohagakure, and there was a palpable sense of excitement in the air. The Godem Hokage, the slug Sannin Tsunade, was scheduled to wed the Rokudame, Naruto Uzumaki, on the 10th of November, just 2 weeks away. The wedding was fast approaching, and everyone in the village was scurrying for this unprecedented event. It was easily the most momentous marriage that Konoha, if not all of the Fire Country, had ever seen. Everyone in town, shinobi and civilian alike, was scheduled to greet the couple as they returned from the fire shrine after the ceremony, and that evening would mark the beginning of a week-long festival. Koyuki Kazuhana, the princess of the Land of Spring, would in attendance, as well as the Kazekage and his sister, along with dignitaries from almost every nation within the elemental continent. Even the non-allied country of Earth had dignitaries coming into the village. There were messages of attendance sent as far off as Crescent Island. The only noticeable absence was Rain Country, which had not even responded to the announcement. Konoha was also flooded with merchants from all over the continent, especially from the Land of Waves, which held Naruto as a personal hero, having gone so far as to name their economic lifeline after him. Stalls full of merchandise of every sort commemorating the couple could be found just by walking down the street. In addition, there was also a surge in illicit material concerning mature women and younger men in the adult bookshops, but if anyone saw a direct correlation, they prudently chose to not mention it. Even in her second trimester, Tsunade was, as ever, Naruto's tutor and teacher, and that fact was reflected in his position as Rokudame. Since Naruto's ascension to position of Hokage, people had continued to call Tsunade Lady Hokage, and had begun referring to Naruto as Young Lord Hokage. The inference behind the young in the title had not escaped Naruto, and it had irked him to no end that he was still being underestimated even after achieving his ultimate goal. Realistically, however, he was also understanding, given his young age and direct elevation from Genin to Hokage. Thankfully, under the auspices of Tsunade and Anko, Naruto was rapidly blossoming as a fine shinobi leader. In addition to Naruto's other training, including taijutsu under Guy and elemental training under Yamato, Naruto had gained a command over most of Jiraiya's, Anko's and Tsunade's ninjutsu techniques. At the moment, in the downtown shopping district, Tsunade Senju and Naruto Uzumaki had returned to their apartment, after spending the majority of the morning utterly buried with the preparations for their upcoming marriage. Jiraiya had arrived in the village just that morning, and he had left a messenger toad in the office that said to meet up with him that evening. Most likely he had a report on the Akatsuki and their movements. Having finally set aside some private time in the early afternoon, Tsunade had hauled Naruto away from his new duties back to their home, where she had ordered several boxes sent over from the village archives. Tsunade bent down to move one of the boxes out of the center of the living room where it had been left. Her body strained against the weight, her once monstrous strength and chakra control thrown out of balance by her pregnancy, causing her to struggle with the heavy box, and have difficulty with her balance. "Help me carry this to the table, won't you, Naruto-kun?" Naruto ran over and helped his beloved with the box, the two of them getting it to the coffee table without any mishaps. "Okay, but what are all these boxes for, Su-chan? They're all really old-looking. With Danzo nipping at our heels, questioning the legitimacy of your cagehood, I know that by digging up some documents about my grandfather and granduncle, as well as your father, we might solidify your position in the minds of some of the village clan heads." This box alone is full of the Yondaime's things, including a lot of documents and heirlooms he left behind. When Naruto became the 6th Hokage, he had gained access to information about his father, which had come as a shock to him, to say the least. I was also thinking that by going through them with you, that you might gain a little perspective about the Hokages who you are now succeeding. Leave it to you to turn this into a homework assignment, Su-chan. Naruto mumbled under his breath. I heard that, Tsunade said, playfully but not so gently pinching Naruto's cheek. Scrolls and folders of papers spilled over the floor as they rummaged through the box of the Yondaime's personal effects. Taunton sneezed at the dust that rose up from the old documents. What in the world are these? Naruto asked, taking a pair of wooden shoes with pointed toes out of a box. These gotta look really weird. Tsunade chuckled at her fiancé's confusion. Those are called clogs. They are traditional footwear from your father's homeland. Naruto cocked his head, his eyes squinted shut in confusion. Wait, you mean he wasn't from Fire Country originally? Yes, the Yondaime's family was originally from one of the few outside nations that trades with the elemental continent. You may not realize it, Naru-kun, but your hair and eye color combination is very unusual in Konoha, although personally, I find it very handsome. Wow, so my father's family was from beyond the ocean, huh? So how did my dad become a ninja, then? Naruto said, absent-mindedly spinning a miniature windmill he had found in the box. Quote, Tsunade sat down on the couch and put a finger to her chin in thought. Well, back in those days, foreigners were normally only allowed to operate within a small section of the coastal trading ports, but Minato's father bribed some of the local constables and slipped away with his family into the mainland under the false name Kazama. It is not known for sure, but it was speculated that they may have been refugees, fleeing war on the other continent. They eventually ended up in Konoha, where Sarutobi-sensei took pity on them and allowed them to integrate and become citizens, albeit monitored for the first few years as a precaution against spying. At the academy, your father's amazing skills eventually got Jiraiya's attention. What was so amazing about him? Naruto asked. Well, most people need to practice ninjutsu when they are very young in order to expand their chakra networks, otherwise the networks become stunted and jutsu becomes impossible. But for Minato, your father, it was different. He was a genius who naturally understood chakra nature forms and intuitively created seals. Though years of hard work and raw ability, he won himself Jonin rank, and eventually the Hokage title when Sarutobi first chose to retire. Later, after the war, in his diplomatic travels as Hokage, he met your mother in the village of Whirlpools, and well, the rest, as they say, is history. Tsunade paused after her explanation and asked Naruto a question. You have a special interest in Minato, right? Once you found out he was your father, and gained access to the confidential files, you dove headfirst into his records. Was there something in particular you wanted to find out? Naruto sighed, his eyes downcast and voice a little sad. Well, Su-chan, I was always interested in the man who people said was stronger than the Kyuubi, who I measure my will against every day, and also. Well, I guess even now I'm still a little angry at him. For someone who was such a genius of ninjutsu, he really didn't understand human nature at all. Even now, I wonder what kind of life I would have had if he hadn't used me to seal away the fox. Why didn't he seal the fox into himself, and take it with him as he died? Instead he cursed me, regardless of his intentions. I never really understood that choice he made, so I wanted to gain some understanding of the man himself. I guess both bonds of hate and love tie me to the role of Hokage. After a silent and awkward moment, Naruto's eyes cleared up and excitement sprang into his voice. But as long as I have you, Tsunade, I'll be glad I became Hokage. He said, suddenly hugging her tightly. Tsunade smiled warmly and returned his embrace, enjoying the feeling of holding him. After a few minutes like this, Naruto's arms slowly snaked their way to Tsunade's bosom. Tsunade sighed, exasperated. Naruto, is now really an appropriate time? Well, would prefer to wait for when Hinata gets back from the Hyuga compound? Tsunade emphatically shook her head no. It was a rare chance when they were alone this long, and Hinata's duties at the Hyuga compound made for the perfect opportunity for fooling around, and Anko was still out cold in the back bedroom, having been receiving almost exclusively Naruto's attentions all last night, so for all intents and purposes, she was dead to the world. Say, Su-chan, Have you noticed, they have gotten even bigger lately, like, even more than normal. The whiskered shinobi said, giving Tsunade's breasts a soft squeeze. It was true, the medic Nin's legendary mounds were already swollen with milk from her pregnancy, causing them to seem to reach even larger proportions, and were more than a little uncomfortable for the former Hokage. You know, I'd be glad to help you relieve some of the pressure whenever you want. Naruto offered, a naughty undertone in his voice. How about right now? Tsunade answered in a sultry tone as she undid the belt holding her top on. It was clear she was getting hot under the collar, her pregnancy having done nothing to reduce the libido that Naruto had helped reawaken in her. As they began fooling around on the couch, their research temporarily postponed in favor of research of each other, they had to push several things out of their way. The living room was already crowded with the boxes from the archives and the pile of wedding gifts that had arrived in the mail over the last few days since their wedding announcement. In particular, they had received a small mountain of gifts from the Crescent Islands royalty, King Michiru Tasuki and his son, Prince Hikaru. Naruto's lips quickly found their goal on Tsunade's ample bosom, suckling gently on his older fiancé, who gave off a low moan at the treatment. Tun-Tun, oinking in annoyance at being ignored, began rooting around in an adjacent room. Just as the rest of their clothes were about to join Tsunade's sash and top on the floor, Hinata Hyuga walked unceremoniously in through the front door, a stack of paperwork from the Hyuga household in both hands. Taking one glance at the pair on the couch, she merely muttered, "Of course. Should have guessed." Looking around, she shook her head at the condition of the living room. "It's like there was an earthquake in here, what a mess. Let me see. Anko-sensei is still sleeping, right?" With a silent nod from the duo, Hinata plopped her papers on top of the coffee table, then marched off to the back bedroom, where a loud thump and Anko's cursing could be heard. "That white-eyed skank just kicked me out of bed." Anko Mitarashi bemoaned as she made her first appearance that day, wearing nothing but one of Naruto's shirts. "Oh. Well, you have been asleep all morning, ah." Tsunade haltingly gasped out. Naruto said nothing, his mouth otherwise occupied. "Well, I was really tired and sore. And what's with you two getting busy behind my back, huh? You're lucky I enjoy watching you work, Naruto, or I'd have half a mind to take my time showing both you and Hinata what happens when I get woken up before I'm ready." Anko seemed to be in an irritable mood, which was odd, given that most mornings after a romp with Naruto she felt like a million Ryu. Hinata sighed and went about straightening the room. She knew she would have to have a chat with the purple-haired kunoichi. Naruto had become central to Anko's life, but she still retained a bad habit of hiding her pain from others, especially Naruto, who tended to worry in excess over the women in his life. The fact was that what she was playing off as a bad mood upon waking up could just as easily be her curse seal acting up. Rousing herself from her thoughts, Hinata snapped at Anko. "Just leave Tsunade-sama and Naruto-kun alone for now." "But why should Baon get all the fun?" Anko pouted angrily. At this, Tsunade stiffened and Naruto shrunk down slightly, afraid that Anko's use of his old nickname for Tsunade would trigger violence between the two half-naked women. Hinata stepped in trying to defuse the situation, having become more protective of the two Hokages since Tsunade confided in needing Hinata's help with her relationship with Naruto. "Anko, please help carry these gifts back to the guest room, there is no room in here anymore." Hinata asked. "No way, why should I? Look, we can't be tripping over all this stuff coming and going, and there will probably be even more on the way. Just do it, okay?" Tsunade said, having finally caught her breath from Naruto's ministrations. "Make me, ya old cow." Anko growled. A vein visibly pulsed in Tsunade's bejeweled forehead. "Grr. Just please make yourself useful for once, you shin-guard-wearing lunatic." Tsunade barked. With a grumble, Anko along with Hinata started clearing the gifts from the living room, leaving Naruto and Tsunade to continue their fun uninterrupted. As they finished stacking the piles of gifts in the guest room, they both sat down and took a break. Hinata asked, "Why do you still hold up this facade of acting tough? I can tell why you're in such a bad mood, it's your curse seal, right? I'll take a look at it, if you want." "Thanks," Anko mumbled as she moved over next to Hinata and took Naruto's t-shirt off. Hinata's hands massaged the black mark, running some healing chakra through it. "What is your problem, anyway? First thing you do when you wake up, you try to mess with Tsunade. Are you going to act like this at the wedding?" Hinata asked. Anko pouted. I'm just goofing around. Well, you could have fooled me. Hinata responded. Anko replied seriously. I promised myself that I would not be upset when Naruto and Tsunade got hitched. I'll behave, I promise. Anko sighed happily at Hinata's treatment, her muscles relaxing as the healing chakra ran through her. But you and Naruto have become my reasons for wanting to stay here, like this. She said, waving a hand around the apartment. For the longest time I cared about nothing but killing my old sensei and proving my strength to Sarutobi and the other ninja, but now I don't need to struggle for acceptance. Hinata looked down on the spiky-haired Kunoichi's shoulder. You shouldn't hide the curse mark from Naruto, he would turn Konoha upside down to find a way to help you. I know, but Naruto doesn't need another thing to worry about, what with all this wedding nonsense. Hinata smiled. Anko could be more considerate than she looked. But you still can't be all hyper-possessive of Naruto, it's not normal. Hinata rejoined. When have I ever been normal? Anko laughed, then sighed. This wasn't exactly what I really had planned, you know, being the lover of one of my own students, and being his mistress while he gets married to someone else. But despite that, ever since you and Naruto came into my life, I no longer feel alienated or afraid of the future. So I never want to be far from the side of the people who makes me feel that way, ever. Hinata had given some thought to just why Anko clung to Naruto so closely. Naruto had seen her when she was at her very lowest, and he was there for her, which is why now she needed him so much. As much as it bothered her to draw connections between herself and her rivals for Naruto's affections, Hinata could identify with that part of Anko. Hinata turned to Anko, their eyes meeting. Anko-sensei, I can promise you this, Naruto will always be there for you, he promised us both as much. No matter if he loves Tsunade or anyone else, when he promises to be there for you, he will. I know, Anko almost whispered. After a minute of silence, Anko ventured. Say, do you ever hear about Naruto's mission to Mother Island? Hinata thought for a second, then it came to her. Oh, yeah, Naruto-kun went to the land of the sea, along with Ino and Shino-kun, with you as their team captain. I heard he went missing after he got sucked into a whirlpool. Believe it or not, I was kind of scared for him, although I didn't let it out at the time. Even back then, I had already begun to admire him. I was actually very impressed by him when he summoned Gamabunta and defeated Amachi, the mad scientist, and his seemingly invincible water elemental. And most importantly, he redeemed the heart of a local diving girl named Isaribi. You know, she lives in Konoha now, and I've actually received several visits from her, and she still thinks of him often. Also, there is Amaru, a medic nin Naruto saved who immigrated to Konoha and is working as a surgeon at Konoha's hospital. She also often comes by to ask about him. Between them and Sume and her monthly urges and her subsequent requests for Naruto to come over for coffee, I guess me being jealous of every girl that has an eye for Naruto is kind of a useless endeavor. It is a wonder he has any time to be Hokage at all. If it makes you feel any better, I'm sure Tsunade-sama is even more frustrated by that fact. Hee. Actually, it kind of does. Anko chuckled sardonically. Speaking of that, shall we go back and see how they're doing? Sounds good, Anko said, slipping the t-shirt back on. Upon returning to the living room, they found that Tsunade and Naruto had both dozed off after their activities had reached their literal climax. Nodding to each other, they both sat down and curled up to Naruto. The four of them lay there, enjoying the heat radiating off one another, Naruto in the center. If only for a moment, there was peace in the Uzumaki Senju household. This happy resolution was thankfully becoming more common for the group. Under Tsunade's supervision, they were managing to work and play together in a semi-functioning manner. Even though Naruto was now Hokage, he still studied under Tsunade and sometimes Ebisu on matters of the cagehood. Anko still trained with Naruto and Hinata, refining their combat, and they were becoming skilled at working together. The group's teamwork was also improving in the matter of their evening activities as well. Although Tsunade, Hinata and Anko were all prone to jealous feelings toward each other about Naruto, they were beginning to get used to sleeping as a group, as well as getting used to each other's many intricacies. Each of them had their own hang-ups, and on Naruto's insistence, they worked around them understandingly and without judgment. For instance, Tsunade, despite her youthful appearances, had a hint of old-fashioned sensibilities, and it was taking time for her to get used to sharing a bed with Hinata and Anko. As for Naruto, he disliked having power taken from him, most likely in connection to his past of loneliness and powerlessness, and refused to ever be tied up or in any helpless or submissive role, with the sole exception being Tsunade and Anko's penchant for riding on top of him. Hinata was still getting used to Anko's bile attentions, and so by Naruto's request, Anko never tried too much on any given night, usually sticking with just some rubbing, kissing and touching. Hinata also disliked the taste of Naruto's semen, and she was greatly embarrassed by that, as she considered it a failure of her kunoichi ual skills, but with Tsunade's encouragement, she had learned to use her breasts to try to make up the difference. And for everybody's sake, Anko was not allowed any bedroom toys. In actuality, although Anko tended to take control with Hinata, she had no problem with being submissive to Naruto, which Tsunade thought was psychologically interesting. In fact, much to Naruto's relief, Anko actually preferred being the one to be tied up. By working together and understanding each other's needs and shortcomings, they were all slowly becoming a sort of loving, if awkward, family. After about an hour resting together like this, the group roused themselves. As hesitant as they were to end their little group hug, Naruto still had to meet with Jiraiya that evening. As Naruto and Tsunade, Tun in tow, headed out, Anko grabbed Hinata by the arm and dragged her back to the bedroom. "What are you doing? We have to go meet Jiraiya-sama. Naruto-kun and Tsunade-ban can meet up with the old man. You, however, are going to make it up to me for waking me up so rudely," Anko said, licking her lips. "Eep," was all the beat Red Hyuga could manage before the bedroom door closed behind them. Naruto had met up with Jiraiya at one of the better bars in town, atypical of a place of Jiraiya's choosing, as there were no scantily dressed hostesses around, which made for a change. The white-haired hermit waved them over to a booth where he was seated. "Naruto, it's good to see you again. How are your girls treating you? Having your own harem, you truly are my finest student." Jiraiya chuckled. Naruto just shook his head and sighed as he sat down. "Whatever, Ero Sennin, I didn't ask for a harem or anything like that." Jiraiya took a shot of his sake and smirked. "Didn't you?" "No, of course not, you just wanted to help and protect absolutely everyone you met regardless of circumstance, nationality or creed, that's all," Jiraiya remarked, a hint of good-natured sarcasm in his voice. "Face it, Naruto, the fact that women would fall in love with you is a natural outcome of the way you carry yourself as a man. Anyway, getting back on topic, I have some surprising info that as Hokage, you should probably know." "Shouldn't you have come by the office then?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya laughed and said, "Well, I have a pair of reasons for that. First, I like the laid-back atmosphere here better, and second, I thought you could use a drink before you hear what I have to say." Looking both ways to see if anyone else was listening, Jiraiya nodded to the only other person in the room, the bartender, who nodded in response, and walked out of the room. "I have valuable intelligence on the Akatsuki, but first I think there are some things you should know about one of their members, namely Itachi Uchiha. The elders and Danzo may have tried to hide it, but I think you should know everything." Naruto tensed up visibly at the name. It was Sasuke's older brother, the one responsible for transforming Sasuke into a revenge-driven sociopath. Jiraiya continued, "You see, the Uchiha massacre of 14 years ago was a mission ordered by the Sandaime." Naruto and Tsunade were both absolutely stunned. "Sarutobi never told me that," Tsunade exclaimed. "Why would he do such a thing? There was an impending coup d'état by the Uchiha clan, and almost every last Uchiha was complicit. Itachi was a double agent acting for the village. Itachi spared Sasuke against the Hokage's orders. He then voluntarily exiled himself, and ever since has been monitoring the one responsible for the Uchiha coup, the Uchiha founder, Madara, who is alive today and the secret leader of Akatsuki." "That's impossible, he would have to be, what, 100 years old? And my grandfather killed him in a duel," Tsunade exclaimed. Naruto continued, "And the reports I've read, many of which coming from you, Jiraiya, said the leader was called Pain. I found out a great many things since we last spoke. Pain is a puppet, in every sense of the word." A melancholy look filled Jiraiya's eyes. "And when the time comes, I'll deal with Pain personally. In any event, this is all background information to inform you that I've received reports that the Akatsuki are accelerating their plans, and using more force than necessary to capture the tailed beasts, including breaking their previous pattern of using two-man cells." This brings me directly to why I've called you here today. You see, the Akatsuki are coming to Konoha. As we speak there is chatter of mobilization from the Land of Rain. With this solemn declaration a hush fell over the room. Naruto fumed. The bastards knew he was marrying. And they were messing with him. This just had to be personal for the Akatsuki on some level. What did Madara have to prove by attacking during the greatest festivities the Fire Country had ever known? Why not attack a few months before he was Hokage, when he didn't have the entire Anbu at his beck and call? There was no mistaking that there was something deeply personal about this. Swallowing his anger, he asked Jiraiya a single question, how many? And can we count on Itachi as a mole? Naruto's voice was calm but with a serious undercurrent. Jiraiya sighed, his whole body seeming to be weighed down by age as he answered. All of them. All surviving members are mobilizing for Konoha, including their leader, Madara, and his second-in-command, the man known as Pain. As for Itachi, now that Sasuke has abandoned Konoha, I really am not sure whose side he is on anymore. A dread hush fell over the room. All of the Akatsuki, all at once. Tsunade was shell-shocked. Only 2 of them had been enough to hold off the strongest of their elite Jonin. Naruto was the first to speak. They're making their move immediately? Yes, there are reports that over half of them are already within Fire's borders, and that they are all converging on Konoha. How could they have infiltrated the border? Jiraiya shrugged. It's hard to say. Perhaps they had forged papers and disguises, or maybe help from the inside. With all of them coming, it would be a massacre of unprecedented proportions. Tsunade looked worriedly to Naruto. Naruto's eyes squinted shut, his arms crossed and his head tilted slightly to the side. After a moment that seemed to stretch on into an eternity, his eyes opened, and he said, "Okay, here's the plan."
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.